The god of time gave him one simple test: destroy a cicada. For a ruthless young assassin like him, that should have been the easiest thing in the world, until the god said, "I'll be watching you struggle." Then everything went dark. All at once, his taste, his weight, his dreams, his heat, his hearing, his smell, his sight, gone. The only thing he could still feel was his hands wrapped around the spear. A regular person would have collapsed begging for it to stop. Brawl picked up the spear and started swinging, basically at random. He attacked and found nothing. Swing nothing. Swing nothing. For what felt like 100 years, he chased a sound he couldn't even hear anymore. And when his senses finally came back, the cicada was already dead in his hand. He'd killed it 3 lifetimes ago and didn't even notice. The god of time looked at him and said that he's the first that didn't go crazy, and for that he deserves the reward he's been searching for so long. But before that, we gotta see this young boy who just got dropped into a brand new world, and this helpful adventurer is explaining everything to him, telling him about the city, the system, the so-called magic. While the boy stares back all confused, trying to understand any of it. The guy turns to him with a kind smile and says, since the boy has no class, he should just follow him. He'll even give him some meat since the kid looks hungry. Pause. The boy thanks him all cutely and follows the man into a dark Epstein-ass alley, and the guy offers him a totally normal, definitely not laced drink. Our good boy starts pouring it down his throat, or not, because he suddenly spits the whole thing into the guy's face and tells him his goblin paralytic poison always smells the fucking same. It stings the tongue but burns the eyes way worse. Epstein wannabe is panicking, trying to figure out how this kid knew, asking if he didn't just arrive, but our boy already kneed him in the balls, spotted the dagger hidden under his coat, picked it up and finished him off, then says it out loud. Rule number 1. Never trust anyone in this garbage world. Yeah, this nigga is brutal. Now he's a regressor, but in his past life he was just a trash C-rank mercenary scraping by for crumbs. While desperately chasing one last payday, he stumbled into a dungeon and found a strange artifact left by that same god of time. That artifact dragged his soul back to the day he first got summoned into this world. But it might have been worthless because he still has the same problem he had before. He has no class. And after a lifetime of struggle, he got a low-tier bone buff talent. Now this is not your Sung Jin Woo story, where this dude will become unbeatable in 5 chapters, but holy cow, this white-ass emo boy will make dudes tremble. And of course the girls have very big hearts, so I have nothing more to ask. Back to the moment he was disappointed, finding out nothing had changed. To him, this regression felt useless, since his stats were exactly the same as before. Even so, he still had all the memories from the 13 brutal years he spent in Area. As he walks, he arrives at the Healthy Bone Realignment Clinic, and knows this is where he has to change things. In Area, there were many kinds of summoned people: mages who used magic, martial artists who used martial arts, and the most common of all were the classless. They could learn anything, but they were also the weakest, often dying before they learned enough to survive Area. That had been his life too, 13 years as a C-rank mercenary suffering one humiliation after another. In the end, he died poor and unnoticed. An old man studies the boy who wants a skeletal remodeling procedure. Knowing what chances he missed before, Sun Min decides to act differently and become far stronger. His plan works. He gets the low-rank martial skeleton and the celestial cultivation technique. Even without money or talent, Lee can feel his body changing as he leaves the clinic. He had just claimed one of the 3 chances that could fix his miserable future. The martial skeleton reshaped his body to make learning martial arts easier. He became the first incentivist to receive the procedure from the acupuncturist who made artificial skeletons. To qualify, someone had to be classless and have learned absolutely no skills. The Lee from his past life couldn't get it because he had already learned a skill, but now he could. And since the doctor would die soon, very few classless people would ever get that same chance. On top of that, he also got the true celestial cultivation technique, a method for building internal energy, the base of cultivation. Sun Min also knew a first-rate technique was hidden in a small Xenovis library. The owner had no clue how valuable it was, so Sun Min bought it for a cheap price. In one day, he took 2 of the 3 chances he had missed before. The 3rd chance would come from winning the Colosseum, set to open a year later. His expectations weren't that high since only classless fighters could enter. That meant he had a real shot to improve enough during that 1 year in Xenovis. First though, he needed money for a place to stay, so he decided to hunt monsters. Tired, the shopkeeper barely noticed the boy in front of him. Several men were looking over the armor and gear on display. With bright eyes, Sun Min says he wants to buy some of it. The vendor asks if he can actually pay. To get all of it, he would need at least 300,000 Erts. He even tries asking for credit, but it fails, and he's thrown out. Still, the vendor notices how determined he is. Sun Min then offers his clothes as payment. He claims they're high-quality clothes from an advanced world, but the vendor just bursts out laughing. That reaction starts to annoy some of the men nearby. The vendor says he won't lower the price just because the boy is classless. To him, the brat had no shame. Even so, saying he didn't need the dirty clothes, he agrees to sell on credit. The vendor liked the kid's guts, fighting this hard despite being just a brat. He figured the boy wouldn't die anytime soon and might turn into a loyal customer. Now geared up, Sun Min looks toward the dark forest. Buying armor had been the right move, even if it cost him everything. He was glad for the favor and felt lucky this new life was already going differently. As he walks, he stays completely alert. Once inside the hunting grounds, he remembers how 13 years ago he came here as a helpless boy with no armor and no skills. Back then, he had been completely pathetic. The system lists several gains, including Lightning Step, a strong skeleton, and Destruction Palm. Soon the sun starts to go down. Then something suddenly moves fast nearby. A goblin tries to hide in the forest, but Lee Summon is already using the soul-chasing sword technique on it. With one strike, his spear drives through the goblin's face in a clean one-shot, one-kill. The goblin can't defend at all. Afterwards, Summon tries to rest, but sharp pain spreads through his body. Looking at his hand, he sees the problem. One-shot, one-kill uses the left hand for support when throwing the spear, and his untrained hand got burned. Still smiling, he decides to toughen his hands through training. Even if this regression seems useless, it's still a fresh start. In a dark place, red smoke rises. A mysterious young man sits on the ground and uses his power. Magic wraps around his body as he senses something strange nearby. Sun Min returns to the simple inn where he had stayed since arriving in area. When he enters, he's greeted with a smile. Jack Atrusi, the middle-aged innkeeper, is waiting for him. Sun Min hands over that day's lodging fee with a new dimensional pouch. Jack thinks it's odd for a classless boy to own something so rare, but Sun Min just says he got a good deal. Used to strange things by now, the old innkeeper doesn't press him and instead checks the goblin teeth and fluids. Jack lets him stay 2 more days, taking the materials as payment. Even so, he's amazed by Sun Min's persistence and sees real potential in him, especially for a boy who came to Xenovis with no class and no skills. After 2 weeks, he was still alive, hunting every day and always bringing back enough to pay for his room. Jack says most classless people could never do that. He even says Sun Min might become someone like Zenon. Done with the talk, the boy turns away and heads upstairs, saying he needs rest after a long day. Once inside his room, he thinks about Jack's words. He wasn't gifted, just stubborn, desperate, and still alive. When he opens his status window, he checks the techniques he has gained. Even after starting over, he still kept the knowledge from his past life. He knew he could reuse techniques from memory, but the ones he had mastered before were mediocre. No matter how much he trained them, they would never let him surpass the strong. Only the celestial cultivation technique gave him any real hope. It wasn't amazing on its own, but paired with better martial arts, it could carry him much farther. So he decides to focus on improving that technique first. The next morning, just as he's about to leave, Lula, the innkeeper's daughter, stops him. Worried, she asks why he keeps risking his life in the forest every day. Lula tells him he could just take a safe job nearby, but Summon has already made up his mind. As someone from another world, he needs to hunt to earn money. Lula still thinks he's an idiot and tells him to find a normal job. Worried, Lula offered him work at the inn since her father liked him, but cooking and cleaning just weren't for him. She still couldn't get why he'd risk his life instead of taking a safe job. Lee Sung Min stayed quiet, thinking about this new life. He turned away and said he'd be back by dinner. In his past life, he survived by giving things up, and he knew he could do that again. But he refused to live the same way this time. He swore he'd finally get what he deserved. To do that, he was ready for anything. He wanted a better life than before. As he headed out to hunt again, Xenovis's afternoon bell rang. That sound meant a new summon had arrived. From a distance, he felt the familiar energy gathering. It was a kid, about the age he was when he was summoned. Just like before, the child looked helpless, an easy mark for scammers. Some men were already offering the same bottle they used on him. He briefly thought about helping the child but chose not to get involved. When he turned away, he bumped into someone beside him. The man was huge. Before he could react, he got dragged into a setup and was accused of breaking a bandit's collarbone. The giant, furious, punched him in the face and dropped him before he could respond. The noise made nearby people look over. Trying to control the crowd, the attacker shouted that the boy had broken his bone and should suffer the same injury. Even confused, the townspeople just ignored it and walked off. Set on revenge, Hongnim decided to break the boy's collarbone. Furious, Lee Songnim realized they were all working together, and the thug in front of him was a third-rate martial artist who couldn't even tell a rib from a collarbone. Martial artists are ranked by skill, and third class is only minor mastery. Lee Seung-min hadn't even fully reached that level yet. He'd need help to win, but he knew nobody in Xenovis would step in. When he realized the child would be sold as a slave, he stepped in and warned him not to drink the poison. The child looked confused but stopped raising the bottle. Lee Seung-min hoped the boy knew some martial arts and was from Murim. Then the drink spilled onto the ground. Hyung-nim stepped in front of him and mocked that he'd sell well to nobles with twisted tastes. He bent his knee to strike with a blow, but Lee Seung-min refused to let it end there. He used lightning step to close in on his enemy. Then he followed with exoskeleton steel break, catching the thug off guard. With one hit, he kicked the attacker's rib. His partners watched from a distance. Destruction Palm and his other moves worked, but the man was absurdly tough. The two paused for a moment to catch their breath. Even with his experience, Lee Sung-min still couldn't match stronger martial artists. Hyung-nim wasn't scared at all. He figured the smaller boy would wear out first. Meanwhile, one henchman warned that the noise would bring the guards. Determined, Lee Sung-min rushed in again. The child watched the fight closely from afar. Realizing fists weren't enough, Lee Sung-min grabbed his spear without hesitation. Then the child suddenly appeared beside him and asked him to repeat what he'd said earlier. Lee Sung-min had no idea why. Telling him to wait a second, he tried to block the next attack, but the boy stopped the giant's hand with one touch. Then he blasted Hyung-nim away with his power. "I can't believe those insects of mine treated you so rudely." The bandit crashed onto the pile of injured bodies. That palm strike filled with internal energy was far beyond second or first class. Lee Seung-min realized the boy beside him was a peak martial artist, despite being the same age. After the fight, Seung-min was shocked. The boy might be Wooji Ho-young, the little celestial demon. The demon cult is made of unorthodox sects that worship power above all. Its strongest member becomes the celestial demon, and his son is called the young master. That meant the boy was the little celestial demon, Wooji Ho-yan. Even though he was Seung-min's age, the gap between them was huge. In that moment, Seung-min knew he was facing someone famous in area. Even though Seung-min already knew, Wooji Ho-yan introduced himself anyway. Later, the two talked in a room, and Lee Seung-min gave his own name. The boys shared something very important. Area was a completely different world. There was no demon cult there. Wooji Ho-yan laughed, clearly enjoying the situation, but there was concern in his eyes. Thinking back to the square, he asked what Lee Seung-min had shouted at him. Not seeing why it mattered, Seung-min said he was warning him not to drink goblin paralytic poison. But the little celestial demon didn't like being addressed so casually. So Lee Seung-min bowed and apologized, saying he didn't know he was the young master. Inside, he couldn't believe he was bowing to a 13-year-old. Wooji Ho-yan smiled, completely pleased. Then he pointed at Seung-min and said he'd seen him use martial arts earlier, but called those techniques trash. He said Seung-min's fighting style was ridiculous, and asked where he'd learned such a mess. Lee Seung-min couldn't figure out what Wooji Ho-yan was after with this talk. Then instead of mocking him further, the boy offered to teach him martial arts. Lee Seung-min stood there in silence. Certain of himself, the little celestial demon said Seung-min would improve fast under him. But there was one condition for Lee Seung-min. Shocked, he braced himself. Wooji Ho-yan wanted him to be his friend. Cold sweat ran down Seung-min's back. He was completely thrown off. Since childhood, the heir of the demon cult had wanted a friend. His father never understood it, but Wooji Ho-yan had read in a book that friends help you overcome anything. His father said that was for ordinary people, not for him. Celestial demon Wooji Ho insisted his son would rule all demons without a friend. Wooji Ho-yan grew up under non-stop training and brutal discipline. His father was strict and cold, and treated any wish for human connection as weakness. During one training exercise, a 10-year-old Wooji Ho-yan slaughtered 50 people. As Wooji Ho's son, that kind of feat wasn't surprising at all. Even so, he showed little emotion. Still, his wish for a friend came true when he met Lee Seung-min, a man who had returned from the future. As the sect heir, huge expectations were placed on him from birth, and his training began early. Because of that harsh childhood, he never had the chance to make friends. Even under such strange circumstances, the two made a friendship pact. Wooji Ho-yan couldn't hide how happy he was to have a new friend, Lee Seung-min. So the regressor, nearly 28 inside, became friends with a 13-year-old. Wooji Ho-yan began teaching Seung-min the mystic arts of the Violet Dawn, a demon cult technique known for its violet-colored internal energy. Seung-min was confused. He thought he would be learning demon arts directly. Now that they were friends, the little celestial demon told him to speak casually. When Lee Seung-min changed his tone, the boy looked fully satisfied. The true demon arts could only be learned by the cult leader and heir, so Seung-min would study other techniques instead. Walking through the forest, Lee Seung-min realized quite a bit of time had passed. Wooji Ho-yan had trained him in the mystic arts of the Violet Dawn for a whole month. He could now beat several monsters at once, but he still wanted more strength. His level had risen to somewhere between 3rd and 2nd class, far better than in his past life. Even with that progress, Wooji Ho-yan's sharp criticism kept pointing out his flaws and pushing him harder. In the forest, Lee Seung-min thought about gathering his spoils. Then a huge creature burst from the trees. A deadly monster lunged at him. If he hadn't dodged in time, he'd have died. Looking closer, he saw it was an orc. He checked to his right, then left, and realized he was alone. He would have to kill the orc by himself. He drove his spear into the creature's chest. Soon he tore a hole through its body, leaped in, and finished the fight. He thought killing it had been easy, but then remembered Wooji Ho-yan's annoying comparisons. Still, he studied the orc's odd appearance, since monsters like that normally didn't live there. A voice praised him, saying he was strong for someone so young. A man then approached him carefully. It was Moon Hee-ryung, a famous warrior once called the Orchid-Destroying Sword of the Central District. Lee Seung-min didn't know what the man wanted. Pointing at the dead beast, Moon Hee-ryung said he'd been hunting an orc that had been causing trouble nearby. Back in the city, a small monkey, Dusong-ryung, wondered if the boy in front of them wasn't too young. But Moon Hee-ryung said he'd seen the boy fight himself and found his skills interesting. Wang Pei, called the Black Rain Dagger, accepted Moon's judgment and introduced himself. A girl named Rainier then introduced herself and said she came from Vela's magic school. Curious, she asked if the young man knew what kind of job was waiting for them. An orc group had built a village nearby, raiding other villages and killing adventurers, so the guild offered 20 million earned to wipe out the orc village. If they won, the money would be split into 5 shares. The boy quickly figured his cut would be about 7 million. Even with that big reward, Seung-min still doubted the people around him. Moon Hee-ryung waited for the boy's answer. After a short pause, he agreed. Please, the warrior said. The mission would be much easier with him. Sandman appreciated the welcome, but he still felt uneasy. He asked about the two people sitting there and learned they were just pack mules, classless nobodies. When they heard the new fighter was from Merim, they bowed to him. Their job was to carry supplies paid from whatever money was left. After the girl handed them coins, they went to buy apples. Renier ate apples as they traveled. Soon the party reached the orc village. They guessed there were around 50 orcs total, though only 30 would likely come out. Dusongrian was sure the orcs were slow and dumb. He planned to kill them fast and claim the reward, so the team would split in two. The young warrior would stay with the veteran swordsman. The others would draw the orcs out, then split them up and pick them off. Renier would spread their scent with wind magic, since orcs were very territorial. Then they'd hide, wait for the right timing, and let the mage ready her spell. The small warrior and Woon would light the signal to pull the rest of the orcs outside. That was the final plan, and it sounded simple enough. Sabine thought it was decent for such a small team, though a trap would have been better. Woon Hiri-young noticed they were close to Orcland. From here on, everyone had to stay sharp and fight right. The first group moved in, while the so-called nobody hauled the gear on his back. As they entered enemy ground, the boy thought about how hard this job was, especially for classless men. Looking at the carrier's face, he was reminded of his old self. He stopped and asked the man his name. The carrier introduced himself as Brass. Someone doubted Brass could survive once the battle started. So the boy told him to choose now, run or stay. He knew the leader wouldn't care. The man wasn't even listening. Breathing hard, Brass said he couldn't run. He had no idea how the guild would punish him for abandoning the mission, so he'd have to fend for himself. When they spotted the village, Woon told the boy they'd arrived. After avoiding patrols, they noticed stakes set up among the trees. It seemed like the right time to light the signal. But the boy asked for a minute and searched through his dimensional pouch. The leader had no clue what he was doing. Then the boy poured out water and had them smear mud over themselves to hide some of their scent. As he coated himself, he said his master taught him that trick. He told Woon Hiri-young to cover his scent too. Woon listened and dropped into the mud. The boy even made more for Brass before the flare was finally lit. The orcs noticed the strange flame. Then the leader suggested using the pack mule as bait. Send him out, distract the orcs, then strike from behind. Hearing that, Brass panicked. He clearly didn't want to die, but Woon promised he'd be safe. Still, he warned that refusing orders might get him killed. Then he brushed it off like a joke while the others waited for the next move. The young warrior chose to go first, showing real nerve. Seeing what he meant to do, the commander agreed. The plan worked, drawing 13 orcs out of the village and killing them one by one without trouble. In the fight, the boy showed off his spear skills, landing clean strikes as more orcs came rushing out. While fighting, he caught himself wondering why he was doing this. Then he focused again and realized he had to help the classless man. Maybe it was just pity, maybe not, but he chose to protect him. They weren't really friends. He just saw himself in another man pushed to the edge. The orcs waited for his next move. Remembering his training, he attacked again with his spear. Even with his master's harsh words in his head, he held firm. He recalled Woon Hiri-young's lesson. The right way to use a spear was to strike from range. With that in mind, he used the soul-chasing spear, third form lightning split strike. That move cut down many of the orcs they had lured out. Beside him, Woon Hiri-young kept fighting hard. Elsewhere, a huge orc moved to kill Brass. With no idea how to defend himself, the man could only wait for death. Then the boy drove his spear into the orc and saved him. He smiled, glad he had protected the classless man. By then the ground was covered with dead orcs. The leader started cutting off their ears and counting how many they had killed. The ears would prove the hunt, assuming the other team handled their side too. One tossed his sack to Brass and ordered him to gather everything. After that, they moved to meet the others. Brass looked amazed. He thanked the boy for saving him. Then he headed off to collect the luggage. The boy quietly noticed how sincere that thanks felt. Meanwhile, the others waited for the three to return. Mud still covered them, but their relief was obvious. The first step had worked, and the leader said they finished early, thanks to the young warrior. But the real trouble was just starting. All at once, something flew at the group, a dagger that struck Renner in the chest. She had no idea what happened, and the mage suddenly turned her powers on her own team. The others instantly drew their weapons. The boy blocked the enemy's advance with his spear. Then a memory from his past life flashed through his mind. He saw himself carrying a heavy sack to collect a few coins. Nearby, a crowd had gathered. It was an execution, the first one he had ever seen. The condemned man was a bold mercenary from Morim. On a mission, he had killed all his companions to keep the reward, but he was caught. The young boy stared at the man's head mounted on wood. Back in the present, that same man stood before him. Surprised by the boy's quick reaction, Woon Hiri-young praised him, but the boy already knew the truth. He had seen this man's execution in another life. Even after 13 years, he still remembered it clearly. The leader admitted the boy was impressive for his age after watching him fight the orcs. A second-category martial artist, he challenged the young warrior and said the boy was still weaker. Even knowing the fight would be rough, someone refused to back down. Though lower in level, the boy moved better and read the fight well. He saw the attacks coming, using his spear's reach with sharp precision. Reading the flow of battle, he landed a hit and proved that his past experience and Hoyoran's training made him a real threat. Seeing it up close, Won Young was impressed. Even so, he knew the boy couldn't keep this up forever. But the boy had a trick ready. He had mixed poison into the mud. It didn't need to be injected directly to work. That poison was enough to shake the man's strength and balance. Now Won Hyryong was losing ground and had to change tactics. He suddenly threw himself aside, and Lee Summon saw at once that it was risky. His hands shaking, the enemy grabbed the carrier as a hostage. He declared he could kill the man in one strike. The boy tensed, unsure how to break the deadlock. Won Hyryong was sure Brass had become his weak spot. The boy froze for a moment but never stepped back. Still, using Brass like this was a bad move. He had only helped Brass because the man reminded him of his old life, and now his anger showed. At the same time, Won felt the poison spreading. The boy fought down his emotions, fatigue and doubt, forcing himself to stay calm. He knew he couldn't win carelessly in this state and had to save his strength. If he missed, he'd hand the fight over. If he waited too long, Brass would die. Then Brass did the unexpected. He struck Won's legs, trying to buckle his knees. The boy saw the courage of a classless man doing the impossible. Brass clung to Won's body and threw his weight into him. But the enemy stabbed him with a knife. As Brass cried out, the man looked pleased. A moment later, the young warrior was there. The enemy panicked and tried to beg, but was killed at once. Elsewhere, the monkey had beaten the mage Wang Pei after a hard fight. The danger was over, but the price was heavy. Brass was dead, and Lee Songmin stood above the bodies with his spear through the enemy. After Won Hyryong and Wang Pei died, their bodies were taken to the mercenary guild so the reward of 35 million could be claimed. Wu Jihyun was glad the warrior came back safe. She asked why he was so late. Exhausted, the protagonist dropped onto his bed, wanting a little rest. But Brass's death still weighed on him. If he'd had just a bit more strength, he might have saved him. Back in his room, he kept thinking about what he'd done and felt stained by it. Wu Jihyun suddenly asked if he'd killed someone. She said she could smell human blood on him. Lee Songmin explained that a second-rate martial artist tried to kill him, so he had to fight back. Even then, the little demon felt he was still hiding something. What bothered her most was simple. What was he keeping from her? After hearing that, the boy stood up. He admitted he didn't even know what he was hiding, but he could feel her doubt. He asked if she found it strange that someone like him beat a second-rate martial artist, but Wu Ji avoided the question. Looking at him, she knew he was no ordinary person. As Wu Jihyun wandered the city, she had been trying to understand this world better. She had seen many things there and learned how the classless lived. Most of them were miserable and barely had enough to eat. To humans, killing bugs is easy, but killing even a small animal takes resolve. Through all the hard training, Huizhen kept watching the boy closely. On the very first day after being summoned, Xiongmin went straight into the forest to hunt monsters. To him, survival depended on it, but maybe the other classless couldn't do the same. Or maybe they knew they should, but couldn't risk their lives or kill another living thing. His friend couldn't understand how a 14-year-old classless boy had done all that in one day. After admitting he had adapted fast, she brought up her second doubt. Wu Jihyun said he had no talent. If she taught him 10 things, he'd only learn 3 or 4. Even so, after just 2 months, his spear skill was already beyond a normal beginner's. He didn't make rookie mistakes, and his control over internal techniques was far too polished for someone so new. That was why she found it so strange that a talentless person could learn martial arts this fast. Hoyun's instincts, built from years of experience, told her there was more behind his calm face. Songmin didn't know how to answer, so Hoyun finally said she hated lies. The room fell quiet. Lee Songmin said everyone had secrets they wanted to protect. Trying to force them out wasn't something a friend should do. The child didn't know how to answer that. She only said she had a secret too, like everyone else. She offered to trade secrets, but he wasn't interested. Even so, she tried tempting him with a top martial art. But with no talent and so little internal energy, he knew he couldn't use it. The child, now stumped, didn't know how else to convince him. At last, she offered him 20% of her internal energy. That completely stunned the protagonist. Deep down, the child was only curious about his secret. As his only friend, she wanted to know everything about him. Looking him in the eyes, she said that was what friendship meant to her. Sitting on the bed, Xiongmin asked Hoyun for a promise. If he told her the truth, she couldn't kill him. But Wuji said she could never kill her friend. Letting her hair fall, she revealed that she was actually a girl. The protagonist was completely shocked. She explained that her father kept it hidden from the sect, so she had to live as a boy to follow her path. The reveal was so huge that Xiongmin went silent. Even after coming to this world, she kept the disguise because she'd lived that way for so long. That was the secret she had hidden from everyone, and now she was trusting him with it. After thinking it over, Songmin said they would need separate rooms now. With the mood still heavy, he felt he had to be honest too. Gathering his courage, he took a deep breath and said he was a regressor. Wuji's eyes widened, but she had no idea what that meant. He explained that he had died, gone back in time, and kept the memories of his past life. That made his strange abilities easier to understand, even if it still sounded unbelievable. In a world like this, though, anything felt possible. Curious, the girl asked why she would want to kill him over that. Even if he looked like a 14-year-old boy, his mind belonged to a 27-year-old man. He still felt bad for lying about his age, identity, and past. But to Hoyalan, None of that mattered. She was the one who approached him, told him to learn martial arts, and chose to be his friend. He hadn't tricked her. He only accepted what she offered. So she had no reason to kill him or end their friendship. In those 2 months, she had come to see him as a real friend, and one secret wouldn't change that. To her, that was friendship. Her face softened with emotion as she thanked him for trusting her. Their bond had become real, built on trust and respect. Then she teased Sungmin a little. Even with another life, his current level was still low. She had tons of questions, but those could wait. For now, she was ready to pass some of her internal energy to him. The protagonist was shocked that she really meant it. Internal energy was the power martial artists stored inside their bodies. It was what let them perform superhuman feats. There were no shortcuts. Only cultivation could build that power, which was why people spent their whole lives training it. When Hoi Yin started the transfer, she noticed his blood vessels weren't clean. They were packed with impurities. Even so, she began sure he could absorb at least some of the energy. He just had to use the Violet Dawn arts to keep about 20%. She pressed her palm to his back and started the transfer while he endured it. He could feel the energy moving through his body, even tired after the transfer. Hoi Yin smiled and asked what it felt like. The power, heat, and pressure rushing through his meridians made his whole body shake. That 20% was more internal energy than he had gathered in his past life. He managed to keep half of it, and it changed his body. The rest would settle through his meridians, and with more Violet Dawn arts training, that power would truly become his. Afterward, Hoi Yin collapsed onto the bed to rest. Beside her, the boy thought about why she was doing so much for him. When he asked, Wuji, Hoi Yin just smiled and said it was because he was her friend. Everything she did for So Min was her own choice, not duty. As she rested, she felt satisfied with that. Hoi Yin also decided to teach him one more martial art, the supreme spear technique of the 9 heavens used by the Spear King. Even knowing So Min's limits, she wanted to give everything she could to help him learn it. And as always, she said she was doing it for her own satisfaction. After all, he was her first friend in 13 years, and she didn't want him to die pointlessly like he had in the past life. The protagonist was moved by her kindness. Then she held his face and told him never to bow his head to his friends. Touching his bruised face, she couldn't believe he had actually been punched. Then she pulled him closer. Smiling, she said she wanted to hear something more interesting. As they shared more about the past, their bond only grew stronger. She wanted to know what she had been like in his past life, but the boy said he only knew rumors, that she ruled with overwhelming power at the peak of Uria. After being summoned, she left the city in less than a month, then vanished for 3 long years. Thinking about it, she guessed she must have traveled a lot during that time. She had always wanted freedom, and in the cult, any freedom she had was still controlled by the leader. That was why she was so happy to be summoned to this world and to have made a friend. At last, she revealed that she planned to leave in a month. Dreaming of freedom, she wanted to see the world for herself. After teaching him the supreme technique, she would go on a journey like before. Now she wanted to hear his plans. She asked how her friend wanted to live this life. Hearing that, even he didn't know how to answer. When he thought about his old life and all the pain in it, he only knew one thing: he didn't want to repeat it. He just wanted a better life this time. To the girl, that answer was too vague. She was determined to find out what Lee Summon's real goal was. Resting his head on the bed, he admitted he still wasn't sure. She said she'd be waiting to hear it when he finally figured it out. She also wanted to hear every little detail about his past life. Embarrassed, the protagonist said he didn't have much to tell. But thinking on it, Summon realized he'd never had anyone he could truly call a friend in any life. Hoisin was his first. The night passed as they talked, and then a month flew by. Before leaving, the girl wanted to test how much Summon had learned. It was their last training session before goodbye, and he had to show her everything. Now he had to prove himself with everything he had learned. Hoiyin just smiled, sure he still couldn't beat her easily. Summon raised his spear, eyes full of resolve. Then she offered him something strange, 20 free strikes first. That only made him more wary. He paused, thinking of his first move, then remembered the new version of the supreme spear of the 9 heavens made for him. Hoyan had even named it after him. To him, that meant more than a technique. It meant she saw him as someone special. It combined the supreme spear of the 9 heavens with the deadly soul-chasing spear. With moves and stances shaped for Summon, the match began. He gripped his spear and launched the technique he had learned, then followed with the soul-chasing strike. Hoyan calmly waited for him. With a small movement, she avoided the attack. He kept pressing forward, stronger, sharper, and more controlled. His second stance was lightning-splitting pursuit. Compared to before, the boy who once barely handled a spear had changed completely. He had learned force, how to redirect and throw off an enemy's strike, and control, how to pressure and block. He also learned subtle thrusts meant to break through defenses. Those were basic spear skills, but he had picked them up on his own. Still, he would need daily practice to truly master them. In this fight with Hoyan, he showed all of that growth. Even so, he still couldn't use his full strength. Frustrated, he mixed explosive energy into each strike, just like she taught him. Hoyan was pleased to see he had listened, but as he tired out, he felt the huge gap between them. Even after reaching the second category with Hoyan's help, she stopped him using only her right hand. He was facing a true master. She stayed relaxed the whole time, while he couldn't break through at all. Still, he attacked again. She blocked every strike without trouble. One by one, all 19 attacks were stopped by that same right hand. When none landed, he knew he had lost. But for the last strike, he caught her off guard and brought the spear tip close to her face. He smiled, thinking he had done it, but she vanished at once. Before he could react, she was behind him, proving the match was over. Even so, Huyan praised him and admitted his talent. With the internal energy he now had, someone was made for martial arts. Without noticing it, he had even sensed her presence first, something only the gifted could do. She believed so much in him that she said one day his spear would become extraordinary. She was speaking as if she could already see 10 years ahead. For her, the fight had been easy, but she was still happy because he showed more than she expected. Then she said they would meet again in 10 years. A month earlier, she had asked about his goal in life, and he still had no answer. So she told him to make her his goal instead. Without a goal, a person just drifts through life. Her challenge was simple. Come back in 10 years strong enough to beat her. Someone hesitated, saying he could never reach her level. He said he had no talent, unlike Huyan, a genius who had taken many elixirs. They had started from completely different places. That old inferiority from his past life was dragging him down again. Huyan openly showed her frustration. She hated that weakness in him, and her words lit anger in his eyes. He snapped that he had arrived in an area with nothing, no talent, no support. He had fought a boar in the mud and lived like trash until he died. Huyan fired back that he had learned mystical arts and become a second-rate warrior in only 3 months. Even after getting another chance, he still wouldn't dream bigger or aim higher. She kept trying to make him see it, but he only got madder. Then Huyan realized just how furious he really was. Someone couldn't believe he was being lectured by a 7-year-old. Still, he finally accepted her challenge and made her his goal, then awkwardly said he'd pierce her heart with a spear, which scared Huyan because that was not what she meant. Friends don't kill each other. Once the heat of the moment passed, he agreed and then got embarrassed. Huyan teased him again, leaving him flustered and annoyed. In the end, they made a promise to meet again in 10 years. Smiling, she said she would look forward to his spear. He paused, feeling that sounded a little weird. Even at her age, she loved teasing him. There was a big age gap, but she just joked around with it. She stepped closer and kept pressuring him. Then she declared that in 10 years she'd be fully grown, so he wouldn't have anything to complain about. Summon then set 3 goals: survive, use every chance his memories gave him, and as Huyan stood ready to leave with her bundle, he said goodbye. He promised they would meet again in 10 years, and he looked forward to that day. His last goal, the most important one, was not dying before then. He promised Huyan he would stay alive, because now he had something and someone to live for. Then the two friends went their separate ways. In Xenovis, Lee Sun-min gained 3 big things: the martial skeleton, the true celestial cultivation technique, and the tournament of the classless. Only people without a class could enter that tournament. 10 months after Huyan left, Xenovis held it again. By then, Lee Sun-min had reached first-grade martial skill, so winning was easy. His prize was a secret elixir that boosted internal energy. He drank it right away, though compared to what Huyan had given him, it felt far less impressive. With that, Lee Sun-min felt he had gotten everything he could from Xenovis. Now it was time to leave, and on the way out he met Hans, the street vendor. Hans congratulated him and asked what he wanted to buy, but it quickly turned into a farewell, since Sun-min was leaving. Hans understood and smiled, proud but a little sad. He had known Sun-min since the start and believed the classless boy would do well outside the city and survive for a long time. Before Sun-min left, Hans gave him something. It was a used dimensional bag with 50% more space than his old one. Sun-min was confused why Hans would hand over something so valuable. Hans just said gifts should be accepted, and the bag wasn't worth much to resell anyway. It was a goodbye gift, and when Sun-min became famous, he could repay him 100 times over. He only wanted Sun-min to remember that a simple street vendor had helped him at the start. Grateful, Sun-min thanked him. Before leaving, he went back to the inn where he had been staying. There, Lula, the innkeeper's daughter, stopped him. She quickly realized he was leaving. The room was far too neat, so it was easy to tell. She pointed out that cleaning rooms was supposed to be her job. Sun-min realized how thankful he was for his time at the inn. Lula knew people like Sun-min always left the city eventually, and she was used to that. Still, when he confirmed he was going, she looked sad. She didn't want to accept that he was leaving so suddenly. Before he could go, she blurted out that she hoped he died horribly somewhere far away. Then she stomped off in anger. Jack, the innkeeper, saw his daughter's outburst and was left confused by how hard women could be to understand. He apologized, saying she was still young. Sun-min took it calmly, showing the maturity he carried inside. Then Jack gave him an old cloak from his younger days. It had heat retention magic and sword magic, making it very useful despite its plain look. Sun-min thanked him, and Jack told him to get it resized, since it was too big. He added that Sun-min was the best classless guest the inn had ever had. With tears in his eyes, Jack told him to stay safe. Sun-min put on the cloak and left the inn, but he stopped when he heard someone running toward him. Right as he was leaving, Lula shouted his name and ran up to him. When he turned, she was standing there behind him. She had run so hard she was out of breath. After taking a moment to recover, she lowered her head and took back what she had said earlier. Sweat ran down her face as she told him she wanted him to live a long life instead. Sun Min was surprised she had come all that way just to say that. From her heart, Lula wished for him to live long, and if he ever got tired to come back to this city. He thanked her and smiled, touched by her kindness. Then she admitted that somewhere along the way, she had started seeing him differently. She didn't understand the feeling but thought she had started to like him. After her confession, they stood in silence until Sun Min said he had already known. Lula was scared he might die, so he told her not to worry. Then they said goodbye. But once it was real, Lula burst into tears. In his past life, Sun Min needed 3 years to finish at Xenovis. This time, it took only 1. Back then, he left with no good memories. Now he was leaving with ones he wanted to keep. He looked back and wondered if he would ever return to Area. With that thought, he left carrying one promise to stay alive. Lee Sun Min reached Mount Mercy while still very young. His next step was choosing a prohibition, and if he wanted to survive, he had to endure it. He remembered Huyan asking where they should meet again, since she barely knew this world's map. Thinking of a central place, he chose Behengar. There were still 9 years until that promise, but now he had a new question: where should he go first? He didn't need to rush to Behengar. He even thought about becoming a mercenary again, but that meant repeating his old life. This time he wanted a different path. He needed time to grow, so he thought of Mount Mercy, land of the god of trials and tribulations in Area. People said training there could become hundreds of times more effective, and Mount Mercy was close by, so he made his choice. Once he found the mountain, he started training under the prohibitions given by a priest. He received 2. The first was the prohibition of weight. His body, clothes, and even the things in his bag all became heavy. Even bread felt like lead. The second one was even worse. The moment he bit into the bread, he got sick. Food now tasted so awful that he threw up at once. That was his second prohibition. It twisted his sense of taste. He didn't lose taste completely. Instead, everything he ate tasted disgusting. Not just the flavor, the texture too. It felt as horrible as biting into a wriggling bug. He was shaken when he realized he might not be able to eat or drink. For a moment, he thought about quitting. Maybe he didn't need this trial. If he went straight to Bahadur and worked as a mercenary, he'd likely reach rank B fast. That alone would beat his old life. Still, he kept thinking about Wu Jihoyan. Remembering her, he forced himself to eat the bread. It filled his mouth with the worst tastes imaginable, but he kept going. Even while cursing Mercy for such a cruel prohibition, he chose to endure it. Nearby, the goddess whispered that he was an insolent human. Then he suddenly felt energy moving through his body. He turned around, saw no one, and wondered if he imagined it. A week passed. The weather kept getting harsher, but he still tried to hunt and spotted a deer. He grabbed his ring, hid, and waited for the right moment before lunging at it. But when he got close, the deer looked so harmless that he couldn't kill it. He froze, and the deer escaped. Lee Sun Min's time on the mountain kept getting harder, and he didn't know how much longer he could last. Exhausted, he set down his spear and thought about his life. With no proper nutrition, he survived on bread and water. On that mountain, he had to find his own food, clothes, and shelter while dealing with the prohibitions. The weather swung to extremes, and the beasts were fast and strong too. The weight made hunting hard, and even if he succeeded, the taste prohibition made eating nearly impossible. He planned to train there for at least 2 years, yet he was already near his limit after 1 week. While thinking about that, he sensed someone strange coming closer. Then a woman appeared. He didn't know her and wondered who she was. There was a rule on the mountain that stopped practitioners from harming each other, so maybe he was safe. Still, the woman had a prohibition that kept her from speaking. She could only use gestures. Sun Min quickly understood that she carried the voice prohibition. Then the same deer from before appeared in front of him, dead. Using a stick, the woman wrote on the ground in Iria's common language. She had been watching him for days and knew he would die soon at this rate, so she came to help. He was thankful, but still suspicious, and asked what she wanted in return. She wanted nothing. She was simply helping. That strange woman ended up helping him completely. She called herself just a kind person, and whenever he was in trouble, she showed up again. One day he asked her name and was stunned by the answer. She was Baksogo, a legendary figure from his past life, known as Baksogo the Lightning. She was famous for moving as fast as a flash, but meeting a future legend wasn't what shocked him most. He knew that 8 years later she would be killed by Wuji Hoyan, the little celestial demon. On Mount Mercy, practitioners received brutal new prohibitions every 6 months, and they couldn't harm each other. Sun Min tried to figure out how Baksogo could have died, wondering if it happened in some dungeon. Beside him, the woman watched him carefully. He jumped a little when she suddenly moved again. She wrote on a stone with her fingers, checking on him and worrying that he was starving again. Even with her great martial skill, her prohibition stopped her from using sound transmission too. As he looked closer, he noticed something else was wrong with her. After a year and a half on the mountain, her newest prohibition made her unable to feel her left arm. Just like him, she also lived with harsh limits. Baksogo pitied him, especially because he could no longer enjoy food. Curious, he asked what kinds of prohibitions the others had, so she decided to introduce him to the other people who had trained there for over half a year. Before he could think, Baksogo vanished like lightning. Startled, he wondered how anyone could ever match her speed. Even without the weight prohibition, he couldn't move that fast. With his heavy body, he realized he should work more on movement skills. Interested, he tried asking Bak Sogo to teach him, then awkwardly said he was joking. Instead, she grabbed him with one arm and lifted him. Since he was too slow, she decided to carry him on her back. Panicked, he asked her to wait a second so he could understand what was happening, but she ignored him and ran. When they reached the others, a terrible smell hit them. Scarlet, a future Grand Mage, had prohibitions that stopped her from bathing or changing clothes. Dapijon, the future Phantom Sword, had lost sight in both eyes. Bak-Sogo had restrictions on her left eye, left arm, and her voice. Lee Sun-min quickly realized he was surrounded by people he knew by name. In the future, they would all become famous powers in area, but right now, they were still unknown. Scarlet asked what his prohibitions were. When she heard he started with 2, she doubted him and wondered how long he would last. Dapijon said that for someone seeking power on Mount Mercy, 2 prohibitions made sense. The old man believed the boy was willing to break past his limits, no matter the cost. Sun-min agreed with every word, even if his answer gave the others chills. Dapijon explained that all kinds of people came to the mountain, but only 4 had stayed through the last 6 months. He said he'd be watching to see what the boy did next. He also pointed out that Bak Sogo had started with 2 prohibitions as well. Once introductions were done, they headed back, but she had said 4 people had trained there for more than a year and a half. That meant there was a 5th person, someone named Flam, a name that made everyone wary. Dapijon warned that Flam was dangerous and shouldn't be introduced to the boy. Sun-min didn't understand why everyone feared the last practitioner, but he let it go. Time passed, and after 4 brutal months, he had grown much stronger. The prohibitions got worse, adding more weight and making food even harder to bear. Even so, his progress was impressive. After those 4 months, his Violet Dawn mystic art reached 3 stars. His attacks also became far more accurate and powerful. Mount Mercy was brutal, but the results were worth it. By day, he trained with the Supreme Ring of the 9 Heavens summon style. At night, he practiced the Violet Dawn mystic art. He accepted the pain as part of his path, even when it felt like his bones might snap. This was the fate he had chosen. His body changed as he grew stronger, and his clothes started to feel too small. Then he saw a new face, someone his age watching him with interest. The young man seemed impressed by the spear technique he had just seen. Standing nearby, the newcomer said he had never seen someone his own age on the mountain. He introduced himself as Flam, the very name everyone had spoken with fear. Curious, he asked for the name of the boy with such impressive skill. Elsewhere, Scarlet sat practicing magic while thinking about true geniuses. Dapijon had explained that Flam's talent was so overwhelming that he laughed while standing above everyone else. That was why Sun-min had been warned not to meet him, or he'd fall into endless despair. Remembering the old man's warning, he nervously introduced himself as Lee Sun-min. Though Liam smiled, realizing the boy had already heard about him. Then he turned away and said he needed to train with his spear, not chat. Sun-min could hardly believe Flam was a real genius. As Flam walked off, Sun-min decided not to waste time on someone like that. But the boy wouldn't leave him alone and kept following him with question after question. When Lee Sun-min said he'd go train, he noticed his spear was gone. He turned and saw Flam holding it, clearly trying to provoke him. The grin on Flam's face was creepy. For a martial artist, having someone snatch your weapon is the worst insult. But before anger hit, someone was just confused. Flam casually said he'd give it back after borrowing it for a bit. Then he started copying Summon's moves. Using the supreme balance of the 9 Heavens Summon style, he tried a new attack. He somehow remembered perfectly the move Summon had used to cut down a tree. With smooth thunder-like strikes, Flam copied the spear technique Summon had built over months. After seeing the damage, he admitted it was a great spear art. Lee Summon was shaken. Flam had copied a technique after seeing it only once. Flam just smiled, then laughed, pleased that he was better than Lee Summon. Summon burned with shame. Flam couldn't understand why people came to this mountain to train so hard when he could beat them all so easily. Still, he said none of them were like him. Confused, Summon listened closely. Flam called Bak Sogo, Scarlet, and Dapijon weird, and said he could copy any practitioner's techniques. Even Flam didn't know why he was like that. To Summon, Flam shined like a sun above everyone else, so how could an ordinary person like him ever catch up to monsters like that? It felt different from being with Hoyin, who never showed off her talent, acting superior while pretending to be normal. Flam asked what Summon's prohibition was. Then he said he had 4 of them and even mocked one about humility, making Summon step back. Flam tried to hand the spear back, but Summon refused it. He wanted nothing to do with Flam anymore, overwhelmed by anger, shame, and helplessness. Flam couldn't understand the hostility. He even told Summon to leave the mountain if he was too weak, for that was as far as he got. On this mountain, hurting another practitioner was strictly forbidden. When Summon moved at him, Flam only mocked him. He said Summon attacked only because he knew the rules of Goddess Mercy, kept anyone from getting hurt. Bak Sogo appeared without a sound and watched the whole thing. Flam defended himself, saying he had only borrowed the spear, and someone was overreacting. He also said the spear technique was excellent, but the hero wasn't good enough to master it. The stronger the martial art, the harder it was to perfect, so Summon still had a lot of training ahead. On this mountain, harsher prohibitions brought greater blessings from Mercy, so Flam said the only way to grow faster was to push yourself to the edge. Then his prohibition suddenly stopped him from saying more. Behind him, Bak Sogo looked honestly impressed by his boldness. But it was already too late. Someone had figured out what he needed to do next. Filled with emotion, he ran toward the temple. Bak Sogo desperately tried to call out to him, but her prohibition kept her from speaking. The word talent kept pounding through her mind, crushing her pride. Meanwhile, the young man desperately called for Goddess Mershe. His inferiority kept growing until frustration turned into despair. Hearing her name, Mershe appeared to meet the human who called her. Gripping his spear, he declared that he wanted another prohibition. Lee Summon found himself in a strange space filled with divine presence. The being he had called stood before him. It was Mershe, the goddess of prohibitions, and this was her domain. He asked to make sure she was really Mershe, and she was. The goddess had answered his call. Curious, she asked if he truly wanted to add another prohibition. He already carried taste and weight, both brutally hard. Even so, he was ready to bear one more. Mershe doubted the reason behind his choice. His soul carried the mark of someone who had gone back in time, a regressor. A god can see a mortal's causality. Everyone is born fated to die, and defying that law distorts fate itself. Those who break their destined limits are called transcendental beings. He was not one of them, yet he had still twisted causality and returned to the past after death. Every existence is tied to cause and effect. Defying death was unnatural, and his soul would pay a huge karmic price. Nothing would happen while he lived, but after death he would suffer for millions of hours. That was the true cost of breaking the law. But the protagonist didn't seem worried about death at all. In front of him, Bak Sogo looked deeply upset by what he had done. She had realized he added another prohibition despite already carrying two terrible ones. As he trembled, he noticed he had made her worry. Her face showed surprise at his words. Then she asked what kind of prohibition he had chosen. Now he would bear the prohibitions of heat and dreams. Restrictions tied to senses and abstract things were far worse. The first stole all warmth from his body. Sunlight and fire meant nothing. The second turned sleep into endless nightmares, forcing his worst memories to repeat. His parents' childhood fear, anxiety, every painful thing haunted his dreams. Sleep no longer brought rest, and Bak Sogo realized just how insane he was. What he did was reckless, and even if he grew strong fast, the cost would be awful. While she argued with him, the young man quietly answered. With a sad face, he said he had no talent at all. His growth was too slow for someone carrying so many restrictions. That gap between effort and talent made Bak Sogo wonder what kind of person he really was. Lee Summon had chosen a goal beyond what his talent should allow, and Flam had shown him what needed to be done. If he wanted to stand beside people with absurd talent, then he had to do something just as extreme. At that moment, the woman understood his reason. The two fell silent. Neither said a word. Then she smiled, seeing how huge his goal really was. Bak Sogo also wanted to become the strongest in the world, so she understood him. The boy listened, confused. He remembered asking her before to teach him movement techniques. Even if she had called it a joke back then, now she meant to teach him. She handed him a secret manual called Shadowless Soul Flight. It was both a movement art and a mystic art, holding everything she knew about mobility techniques. As he flipped through it, he saw how amazing it was. She didn't fully know why she was giving away something so precious, but she knew he would never quit. From now on, he was to call her senior sister. With a soft smile, she admitted she felt for him and cared about him. Besides, she liked to think of herself as someone who helped others. The protagonist trained again, keeping Wuji Hoyan's memory close. He switched between the Supreme Spear of the Nine Heavens and Soul Pursuit. By the fifth stance, he was already using Deadly Lightning. In his mind, he pictured the damage his own body would take while facing Hoyan. Even after more than 10 years of training, he still couldn't beat the little celestial demon. In the end, Hoyan said teaching him martial arts had been a mistake, and gave up on him. Using her power, she decided to take back everything she had given him. After destroying his Danshin, he would never use martial arts again. As she walked away, Simon desperately called out to his friend. Each step felt like his body was breaking past its limit, filling him with fear. Lee Simon jolted awake from that nightmare about Wuji Hoyan. He was drenched in sweat, heart pounding. Then he realized it was only a dream. Relieved for a second, he tried to steady his shaking hands, then noticed the mysterious girl watching him. Startled, he stared at Scarlet, who had been observing him while he slept. She brought up his recent actions, especially adding more prohibitions. Her closeness made him uneasy, and the smell around her was so strong it stung his eyes. With a sarcastic tone, she mocked his choices, dreams and heat, and said he was going to die. He was already feeling sick from the smell when Daok Baijun arrived. They had come for a reason to help him. Confused, he couldn't understand why they suddenly showed up. Scarlet repeated that they were here to help Lee Salmon. The mute woman had sent them along with magical tools. Once he realized Bak Sogo was behind this, he understood. Scarlet had brought magic scrolls he could use to learn spells. With those scrolls, using magic would become much easier. Daok Baijun offered a more direct kind of help, training his body to handle the pain of the prohibitions. Determined, the young man was ready to do all he could. At that moment, the two prepared him for battle. Scarlet taught him 4 kinds of magic, starting with mental cleansing. It was meant to purify his mind after the nightmares had polluted it. The second spell was a simple one that could strengthen him faster. That made it very useful for enduring the weight prohibition. As he sparred with Daok Baijun, he used the third spell to recover fatigue. It was a magic that restored stamina, but using too much of it would drain his life force and could fail. Still, if he wanted to survive that hellish training, he had no other choice. Even after all that prep, his fight against the old blind man was still poor. He couldn't even last 100 seconds, but Sun Min said he'd do better next time. Then the heat prohibition suddenly shook through his whole body. Deokbi did what he could to help, pressing spots on his body to make him handle the cold better. Not long after, the boy started feeling a little better. The sword phantom pressed his blood vessels to speed up his metabolism, so he could endure the prohibition. After helping him, the old man quietly walked off. He said it was hard to find a sparring partner on that mountain. Lee Sun-min felt grateful and knew he would have died long ago without all this help. Since his regression, the people around him had been much kinder. Thinking about that, he realized how strange it was. To him, people normally weren't like that. Ever since he came back, everyone had treated him better than they did in his old memories. As he walked, Scarlet called out to the old man, who noticed her awful smell from far away. She got annoyed at being judged just because she hadn't bathed for a few days. The two talked about Lee Sun-min and how much they were helping him. For a man who cared only about martial arts, the old man was looking after the boy with real care. And it wasn't just him. Scarlet had made magic scrolls herself. When they thought about it, neither understood why they were helping so much. They only knew they couldn't just leave him alone. As Sun-min thought about all that kindness, he chose to stop dwelling on it. In this new life, he saw himself as just a lucky boy. Half a year passed, and the warrior gripped his weapon with all his strength. He kept training deep in the forest, all by himself, his face full of exhaustion. Even so, he refused to quit. Beside him, another person called him a larva. Even that person was impressed, saying he never thought Sun-min would last this long. The warrior stayed kneeling where he was. He said nothing. He'd ignored that person from the day they met. Maybe he had taken the prohibition of voice added after reaching the half-year mark for convenience. Still talking non-stop. The other said he expected Sun-min to pick only harsher prohibitions. Suddenly, the warrior lowered his weapon to the ground. The boy watched him closely. He was nothing like he had been 6 months ago. His dodges, balance, and movement were now clean and steady. The techniques he learned from Baksogo fit him well, and the watcher figured even a larva could grow if it kept crawling. Laughing, he said that crawling was all Sun-min could do after taking on 5 prohibitions. Sun-min ignored every word and kept training. Curious, the other watched again with wide eyes. At last, he picked up his weapon. He demanded to know why he was still being ignored, saying he could read Sun-min's body language anyway. Tired, the boy wondered if this guy had nothing better to do. He knew the other was dangerous, but also knew he couldn't be killed because of the rule against violence. Even so, his companion hit him. The warrior fell, not even noticing the attack in time. The other laughed, saying it was pathetic watching him crawl around like a larva. He had found a way to hurt him indirectly. Holding up his sword, he said Sun-min couldn't do anything like that. The weapon was a key sword. He taunted him, saying he'd never have power like this. So while Sun-min had to struggle for every step, others like him could reach that level easily. Even with all those barriers, the protagonist would keep going, and that shocked the other. To him, there was only endless despair for someone so untalented. Maybe all that effort was pointless, but Sun-min would still fight in his own way. No matter how long it took, he'd keep moving forward like a larva. The other could stay arrogant. One day, Sun-min would drive his spear into that proud body. Even while showing off, the boy stayed silent. Then he drove the spear harder into the tree. The other followed everything Sun-min was trying to say without words. Standing there, he looked imposing. In the end, he just said that if Sun-min really believed that, he'd be waiting for that day. The protagonist had no plans to quit or break down halfway. A month later, Lee Sun-min had spent a full year on the mountain, and it was time to choose another prohibition. He chose the prohibition of hearing. It was torture. His ears were filled with horrible noise he could never get used to. Now carrying 6 prohibitions, he stood near death every day but still swung his spear without fail. His movements let him dodge, stay grounded, and strike cleanly. He trained the supreme spear of the 9 heavens, the mystic arts of Violet Dawn, and the shadowless soul flight. His fights with Deokbi Jun and training with Baksogo also helped him improve. Only Scarlet wasn't much help. As Lee Sun-min grew stronger, his body felt heavier, food tasted worse, and his dreams became harsher. The chills got worse too. An endless noise filled his ears. Still, it sometimes helped by blocking Flam's annoying chatter when he came around and bothered him. So, little by little, like a larva, the protagonist kept getting stronger. When he met Mercy, he asked why she had called him since the next prohibition was still weeks away. She faced him and congratulated him for passing his test. Confused, he had no idea what she meant. Then Flam suddenly appeared before him. The protagonist was badly startled. Mercy explained that Flam himself was the test. Then everything started making sense. Baksogo, Scarlet, and Deokbi Jun had all become known as strong and respected people in Iria, but he had never heard of Flam, and with that much power he couldn't be some nobody. What was strange was that Flam didn't actually exist. Flam explained that he used his great power to push practitioners into despair. Even the most gifted would see him and fall into complete misery. They'd panic, lose their minds, and run away from Flam. But the protagonist was different. Even without talent, he threw himself into an even harder trial and made Flam his target. It was reckless, but Flam still hadn't managed to break him, so that recklessness worked in his favor. Michi told the warrior not to reveal Flam's identity to the other practitioners, or he'd face God's wrath. Either way, the young man would keep training on the mountain. His reward for passing the test would come when he left. Michi even offered him a power beyond what 100 years of training could give. If Lee Subman offered up his soul, he refused. He would rather keep crawling forward and earn his strength slowly. That made Lee Subman think for a moment about what he could do. He truly hated the word effort. No matter how hard he worked, he couldn't keep up with all those geniuses. But being gifted didn't mean they never had to work either. In the end, he hated people who brushed off every real difference by saying, it all came down to effort. At the same time, he'd clung to that word since his past life, where defeatism became his shelter. Now, in this life, he'd had too many fateful chances to hide behind excuses about different starting points. That shelter was gone, so the only thing left was to move forward. Only now was he truly starting to put effort into something. Even so, Lee said he could endure to the end because he liked it. Mercy's face brightened when she saw his resolve. Then she turned away and asked if she could talk to herself for a moment. She said there were no coincidences in Arya. Everything happened for a reason. Arya called in travelers from other worlds and dimensions, giving them abilities as benefits, but no one still knew why. The protagonist realized Mercy wasn't really talking to herself, she was speaking to him. That meant she was telling him something she couldn't say directly. The girl went quiet for a moment. If the protagonist had returned, then something was coming that required his return, so he had to be ready, worthy of the reason he was sent back. She ended that thought with a smile, but there was worry in her eyes. Raising one hand, she declared this was her territory, and told someone to leave unless they wanted to be destroyed. A fragment started breaking apart and cracks opened into holes. Not understanding anything, the protagonist stood still until Mercy told him to go back right now. He had to finish training. There was no time to waste. Before he could answer, she sent him away. She wasn't sure if Lee Summon could stop what was coming. He needed to understand the final destiny. Days later, the sixth chosen prohibition was smell. The stench from the top of Scarlet's head kept hitting the warrior's nose. Maybe picking smell wasn't such a good idea. A woman with a strange air appeared beside him. The harsher the prohibition, the more power he gained, so even with nausea and vomiting, he endured it. Boxbav now carried the prohibitions of taste and hearing, along with the pain of her scattered senses. Compared to what she had suffered before, this felt even worse. The sense prohibition was harsher than she expected. The boy listened when she said she had something to tell him. She firmly said she would be leaving the mountain very soon. The two traded quiet, curious looks. Truthfully, Baksabev didn't need to suffer this much. She was already ranked among the geniuses. After 2 years on the mountain, she had probably reached her goal. The protagonist asked if she was really leaving, and she said yes. As for him, he would stay longer. Sadness showed in her eyes as she understood they would part. Even so, she said she was sure they would meet again. Baksabev quietly looked at the protagonist. She had shared the mountain with for so long. The little boy from before had grown into someone strong. But if she left, he might die by taking even harsher prohibitions and pushing too far. So the woman thought about staying longer to finish teaching him Shadowless Soul Flight. Lee Sun-min told her he'd be fine without her. Thanks to Baksogo, he had endured pain for a long time and could now carry his own burden. He thanked Numi, saying he wouldn't be alive without her. Hearing that, her face lit up with a soft, happy smile. She stepped closer and hugged him. Caught off guard, he felt a little awkward. Then he dropped his guard. His expression grew gentler, and he accepted her honest hug. After pulling back a little, Baksogo told him he was the toughest person she had ever met. The more she learned about him, the more she saw he wasn't desperate like the others. He disagreed, saying he had fallen into despair again and again but always came back. Impressed, she called him amazing, and admitted she gave up facing the flames after meeting him. Then, looking straight at him, she sincerely asked him not to die. He answered with the same promise. He would never die. Not just Baksogo. Dake Bijun and Scarlet also left the mountain. It had been a long time since he felt this lonely. Back in his old life, he had been so cautious that he trusted no one. Now he knew people couldn't live alone. Without them, he wouldn't have survived. He stood still, watching a light in the sky. Something inside him had changed, and the wall around his heart had fallen. For a moment, there was no smell, no weight, and no sound. That brief freedom felt endless, and even the familiar world looked different, just like he had changed. The world had changed too. Summer arrived with the sound of cicadas. 7 years later, Baksogo would meet Wiji Hoang in a dungeon, and die by her hand. To repay her kindness, he swore to stop that future. He kicked at an insect, but the cicadas still got away. Cicadas stay underground for 10 years before emerging, so he had 7 years to stop that disaster. In 7 years, he might become incredibly strong or not. Either way, he was set on changing it. His martial arts improved every day, but it still wasn't enough. He wanted more, trained harder, and even gave up sleep. The trick to moving without sight wasn't special. To survive the ban on vision, he sharpened his other senses and memorized the terrain. His world went dark, and touch was the only sense Lee Sun-min could rely on. After a week, he could move little by little, guided only by the sounds in that darkness. Eventually, those sounds started to feel like cicada songs. and as he listened, he kept swinging his spear without noticing time. His body began using martial arts on its own, and his thoughts deepened. Like a larva, he longed to become a cicada, but even that wasn't enough. He still wanted more. Confused, he didn't know what he wanted to become or why he had regressed at all. The seasons changed, and he could feel it in the wind on his skin. Still, his days stayed the same. He only kept spinning his spear. As time passed, he got used to the dark world. Then Mercy appeared in her home. Lee Sun-min wanted the trial to end. Days later, he noticed something different in his body. After so long, Mercy had returned his senses. He could see again, the horrible smells and noises were gone. His body felt light and the chills had disappeared. Mercy kept watching him. She was wondering how to reward him. Lee Sun-min had spent 3 years on the mountain and endured every prohibition amazingly well. Most people who got too carried away either died or gave up, so she was glad someone like him had appeared and felt he deserved a special reward. Calmly, Mercy asked what he wanted. Excited, he first said he wanted to fight like Luspree, but that wasn't really it. After thinking it over, he tried to sort out what he truly wanted. Time was running out, so he needed to get stronger. With real excitement, he said he wanted far more power, even if he wasn't fully sure what that meant, and asked if Mercy could give him what he needed. The girl answered carefully that what he needed most was more time. He was stunned when he realized she could actually grant that. She placed a mark on his body and told him to show it to Denadar in Dramor. Denadar was the god of time and he would test him. As a friendly warning, she told him to stay alert. Denadar's trials were far harsher than hers. In the end, everything would depend on him, because a dangerous fate still waited ahead. Smiling, he said he liked things just the way they were. With that decided, they could move on to the reward for surviving 3 years on the mountain. He happily called Mercy a very generous goddess. For his reward, she brought out a man in a suit and tie. He was Neville, a negotiator from Erebriza, and he was pleased to meet the protagonist. Neville asked Mercy if this was her recommended new member. Still, he wasn't sure the boy was qualified to join the guild. Mercy told Neville to look again. Once he did, he quickly apologized, realizing the boy was more than qualified. He had only been judging him by the level of his martial arts. At his age, that level would earn respect anywhere. Then they started talking about the great guild, Erebriza. It handled deals, requests, auctions, and information. It could get clients almost anything. Curious, he asked if they sold elixirs and martial arts manuals, and Neville said yes. The guild even had the great healing elixir of Shilin and Mount Hua's cherry blossom sword technique. Rare items like that were exactly Erebriza's specialty. Mercy wasn't a member, but she bought things from them sometimes. A brokerage guild serving a god as a client was pretty strange. Neville reached out his hand and confidently asked him to join. With nothing to lose, he accepted. Neville handed him a paper and told him to sign at the bottom. Just like that, he officially became a member of Erebriza. Neville snapped his fingers and gave him a joining gift. The protagonist's whole look changed, leaving him far more presentable with new clothes and a cleaner haircut. Neville said goodbye and told him to ask if he ever needed anything. Mercy asked if he liked the gift, and Lee Sun-min said he was satisfied. Joining Erebriza was a huge gain, so he had every reason to be pleased. He said his first stop would be Behanger, but the goddess warned him to remember his real goal. She told him not to forget what she had said while pretending to talk to herself. As he walked, he remembered her words, that there was a reason for his regression. He was so deep in thought that he didn't notice the fierce beasts coming near. Even with monsters in front of him, he showed no despair. His mind was fixed on what wasn't a coincidence. As he fought, he kept wondering who had set all these events in motion. Then he charged with his weapon and pushed those thoughts aside for the moment. After 3 years training on the mountain, he had reached the peak of martial arts. At just 18, that was unbelievable. Others might call him a genius, but he knew he got this far through blessings and brutal hardship. His goal was simple: keep growing stronger through the chances fate gave him. After beating his enemies, he headed for Behanger with firm resolve. Smiling, he decided to become a mercenary. The magic-armored Devnark was hidden in the Black Mage's dungeon near Behanger. In the original future, a C-rank mercenary found it by chance. That armor was incredible. It could raise a C-rank mercenary from the 2nd or 3rd tier to peak martial artist level. And if a peak martial artist wore it, they might even reach the supreme peak. Even though he could have stayed on the mountain longer, he couldn't miss that chance. The Black Mage's dungeon would be cleared in a year and a half, so before then, he needed to establish himself in Behanger as a mercenary. At Behanger's mercenary guild, the boy made his request. The bartender had no idea why the boy was telling him all that. If he wanted to become a mercenary, he was supposed to go upstairs and talk to the receptionist. One customer eating nearby laughed at the boy for wanting to be a mercenary. Before he understood what happened, the fork was gone from his hand, and suddenly the boy was holding it while the customer searched for it. After seeing that, the bartender realized he was a peak martial artist. Apologizing for his earlier attitude, he offered him a seat as curious people gathered around them. Then the two sat down. The bartender introduced himself as Mage Baron, head of the Behanger branch of the Mercenary Guild. The protagonist wasn't impressed when Baron said he worked the first floor as a bartender for fun. In his past life, Behanger had been the first place he worked as a mercenary. Looking over the papers, Baron said a peak martial artist would normally receive the rank as mercenary title. But he also knew this was a young, inexperienced boy who had only trained in the mountains. They still needed a fighter, so the boy would have to prove himself. Baron chose a fitting mission for the test and said another rank as mercenary would go with him. If he completed the job, he would earn the title. The mission started the very next day. It didn't take long for the mercenary to find his new partner annoying, because he barely spoke. At first, the man thought this was the funny kid who stole that fool's fork at the guild, but he soon saw he was wrong. The boy gave no reaction to any of it. Even so, his companion admitted the kid would probably become popular. That man was Lude, an S-rank mercenary. They had never met before, but the protagonist knew his name from his past life. Lude was assigned as his partner for this mission, and was probably there to watch how he performed. Curious, Lude asked if he had ever fought an ogre before. The young man answered honestly, no, he hadn't. Ogres were some of the strongest monsters in area, with magic resistance and skin as hard as steel. Their job was to take down an ogre spotted in the forest near a village. As they walked, Lude said 2 S ranks should be enough to kill one. Still, something about the forest felt off. It looked too small for an ogre to live in. The protagonist asked what he meant. Lude explained that ogres were at least 3 meters tall, and some reached 5, so they needed a huge amount of food. A forest this small shouldn't be enough to feed one. Then the young man suddenly told Lude to stop. Lude tensed up and asked what he had noticed. A deer lay on the ground, ripped completely apart. That kind of damage could have come from an ogre, but there were no signs it had actually eaten the deer. Lude couldn't smell anything either, which made it even stranger. Then both of them heard a weird noise. Something was rushing straight at them. The 2 warriors immediately readied themselves. They exchanged a quick look and prepared to fight. Then they charged with their weapons drawn. A giant creature burst forward, smashing everything around it. Both of them froze for a moment, unsure what they were even facing. Lude panicked. It was nothing like the report. He knew they couldn't handle this, and that the best option was to run. The monster had huge claws and an insanely powerful body. It was a modified chimera ogre. A chimera was a magical creature made to become the ultimate life form. By mixing different species, it could overcome the limits normal creatures had. Even one made from a weak goblin would still be at least rank B. Its danger was hard to measure, but with an ogre as the base, everything changed. Not even S-rank mercenaries could deal with something like that. Even the protagonist felt a chill. The giant monster kept tearing through the trees. Debris flew everywhere, but he decided he couldn't run. The ogre suddenly charged at him. Its fist was already right in front of his face. Lude kept retreating, shouting a warning as he ran. The protagonist sharpened his focus, then leaped aside and dodged the blow with shadowless soul flight and untraceable steps. Seeing that bold move, Lude watched from behind a tree, stunned by how fast the boy had moved. This wasn't Mercy's Mountain anymore, and the heavy restriction on his body was gone. Here he believed he could beat the monster. He moved again with shadowless soul flight mixed with shadow dance. As he ran up the creature's body, it noticed him. Closing in, he used the supreme spear of the 9 heavens. His strike carried the soul-chasing kill blow. But Lee Sung-min quickly realized how hard this fight would be. Its skin was nearly impossible to pierce. Even a direct hit barely did anything. His key sword attack hadn't left a single mark. Lude realized the reward would be the same as for a normal ogre, so this was nowhere near worth the risk. Still, escape no longer seemed possible, so he decided to help. But then he got a message telling him to stay back. After realizing it was sound transmission, he stopped. The boy knew how dangerous the monster was and didn't want Lude getting close. Through the message, he reminded Lude that he had never fought an ogre before. Even so, he understood what he was dealing with, though he still didn't know why his sword had done no damage. Even then, Lee Sung-min believed he could kill the chimera. With sword in hand, he used the supreme spear of the 9 heavens together with lightning-splitting strike. The blow landed cleanly, but when he pulled the weapon back, the ogre still stood firm. Lude grew even more desperate when he saw it wasn't hurt. He knew anything he did would be useless, but Lee Sung-min refused to back down and kept his weapon ready. The monster's eyes showed growing impatience. Once more, he closed in. With a jump, he rose above the creature. He aimed for its eyes, the one place that seemed softer than its hide. His sword struck one eye with perfect accuracy. After distracting it with a red thread, he attacked its weak point. Young as he was, he fought with real skill. The creature clawed at the object, causing it pain. Seeing part of the spear had gone in, he pressed the attack. Then something strange happened. The fight should have turned in his favor, but it didn't. The injured eye suddenly healed. It rebuilt itself completely. That's when he realized the monster could regenerate. This chimera had a troll's healing power mixed into its body. His chances of winning dropped even more. Lee Sung-min stayed calm and searched for another way, but the chimera was already getting ready to attack again. Lee shouted at him in panic, but the boy didn't move. Thinking of Baksogo, he remembered there were still things he had to do. He couldn't die here. The 3 basics of spear fighting were things he had trained every day until they became part of him. As the creature came closer, he remembered Waijihoin and all that brutal training. He pointed his spear at the monster's hands and knew this was the moment to use everything he had gained. He needed strength to spin and push aside the incoming blow, so he acted at once. The chimera still looked overwhelming. Without a mark on its body, he sprinted straight at it. Weapon raised, he picked the best spot to strike. He needed control to twist the spear around the enemy's attack, With a light step, he slipped close to its huge claws. Now he had the control he needed to finish the move. Lu Da watched every motion closely. With a precise hit, the boy threw the creature off balance. Gripping his weapon tight, he followed with slicing attacks. While the monster struggled to steady itself, Lee Sung-min drove the spear into its leg. This time, he knew he had landed a real hit. The chimera screamed through its stitched mouth. Just as he expected, its joints were much weaker. When it lunged to grab him, he was already ready for the next move. Confused, the creature tried a more careful strike. It swung a hand down to crush him, but he dodged again. Now he wondered how long a damaged joint would take to heal. There was no time to wait, so he attacked again. The force snapped his spear in half, but he still drove the monster down to one knee, with part of the spear stuck in its body. Regeneration stopped there. Realizing his plan had worked, Lee Sung-min smiled. Using the piece still in his hand, he struck its arm. That left the chimera unable to properly use its legs or right arm. Now it had to brace itself on one hand as pain shot through its body. He knew he only needed one more good hit. So he used the Lee Sung-min style of the Supreme Spear of the Nine Heavens, with lightning-splitting strike. The attack landed with deadly precision. The chimera was too badly wounded to stand. Still, it had one arm left and swiped at him with its giant claws, but it was too slow to touch him. Without the mountain's burden, he could feel just how fast he had become. Then he heard the cicadas, the same sound as on Mount Mercy. As he neared the monster, he thought about how he didn't want to stay a cicada forever. And on the mountain, he had only been a larva. He knew he hadn't trained all that time to stay weak, even if he still didn't know what he wanted to become. Then he struck the chimera's eyes and brought it crashing down. Weapon in hand, he knew he didn't want to live with regrets like in his past life. He would keep moving toward whatever destiny waited for him. Lude was completely stunned by what he was seeing. With a roar, the boy drove his weapon deep into the monster. Watching in shock, Lude could only wonder what kind of person this young man really was. The boy looked exhausted. He glanced at his torn, calloused hands. Even he couldn't answer what he was. But one thing was clear to him. He was not a larva. Lude didn't understand what that meant, but it made the boy seem even more interesting. Nearby, a cicada lay on the ground. The young warrior smiled softly when he noticed its song had ended. Back at the guild, the bartender was totally confused. While looking over the giant chimera, Lude explained everything that had happened. Killing a chimera ogre was an SS rank feat, but there was no rule for giving that rank right away. Even so, the warrior was satisfied with SS rank. The reward for subduing the chimera ogre was 27 million Ursin and an S-rank badge. The monster's body was turned over to the mercenary guild for research, earning another 20 million Urs. Lude handed it all to him, saying the reward belonged to the one who beat it, for a total of 47 million Urs. Lude. As he walked through the streets, he felt like he had truly won. To him, it was an unbelievable amount of money. In his past life, he had risked his life on missions and never earned more than 1 million Urs, so he had no idea what to do with all that money in his hands, until a thought suddenly came to him. Looking at his broken weapon, he got a great idea. Back at the tavern, the talk went on. The bartender wanted to hear the story from him personally. He tapped his head with the staff. Then he saw everything that happened in the forest while they were gone. He looked both shocked and impressed. Lude said the young man deserved SS rank. Since he couldn't decide that himself, he planned to recommend it. The boy who reached that level without a class would definitely catch Xion's attention. Meanwhile, the protagonist stood in a dim place. He called out for Neville. The man appeared at once. Saying it was a summon, he asked why he had been called. The hero had never cared much about weapons. He usually just used anything sharp enough to stab or hit with. But during the ogre fight, he felt how much easier it would have been with a better weapon. He didn't want to face that kind of regret again, so he needed a proper weapon. Neville asked what kind he wanted and how much he could pay. Lee Sun-min offered 47 million Urs and said he wanted one made, even if it took time, but that still wasn't enough. Ebrise's blacksmiths were top tier, so their prices were huge. Neville even suggested using his soul as collateral, though the interest would be brutal. Lee Sun-min refused right away and asked for another option. After thinking it over, Neville said he knew someone who might help him get a weapon. When the warrior agreed, Neville pointed upward. Dark light shot from his finger. Something appeared in front of Lee Sun-min. As Neville struck it, he said he'd leave the two of them to talk there. Not fully sure what just happened, Lee Sun-min studied Neville's power to tear open space. From the other side, a voice noted that he was just a kid. Not knowing how often they'd meet, Selderus introduced himself. Then he told the boy to stop spacing out and step into the rift. Looking closer, Lee Sun-min realized he was a dark elf. After entering the space, he gave his name and said he wanted to order a spear. He handed over his current weapon and said he wanted something like it. The elf examined it and saw it was a spear meant for a balanced style. Then he asked Lee Sun-min to show the techniques he used. He was confused. For martial artists, showing techniques to others was usually taboo. But the elf said it was necessary. Without seeing his style, he couldn't make the right spear. The design could change a lot depending on how he fought. Losing patience, the elf reminded himself he was arguing with a child. He was 400 years old and loved smithing, so he had worked as a blacksmith for over 350 years, even without natural talent. The protagonist looked unsure. Still, the elf said his skill was no worse than any dwarf's. Those words stirred a memory in the warrior. He felt they were a bit alike. After blurting all that out, the elf wondered why he was saying so much to a kid he had just met. So he told Lee Sun-min to go find the dwarves instead, if he wanted a weapon. But Lee Sun-min insisted on showing his martial style. The elf found it odd that the boy still hadn't left. Lee Sun-min said he believed him once he heard about those 350 years of experience. The elf didn't know what to say. With a laugh, he said the boy was way too trusting. Even so, Lee Sun-min wasn't intimidated. Turning away, the elf admitted the boy knew how to talk. Then suddenly eager, his expression changed. The boy just waited quietly, though usually calculating. The elf decided to make something better than the boy could afford, simply because he liked him. Smiling, he thought this kid might become a regular customer. The weapon would take a few months, so all Lee Sun-min could do was wait. Back on his bed, he sat down to meditate. The Chimera Ogre had been his first real fight after reaching the martial peak as a supreme master, and now he had to sort through what he learned. Wei Jihoyan had called his awareness a talent. After all those years in the mountains, it had grown into something like a sixth sense. During the battle, that sense moved his body before he could even think. That was his sixth sense. It was powerful, but he knew he couldn't depend on it alone. The mountains had sharpened his touch and sixth sense, yet the rest still lagged behind. If he didn't train his other senses too, things could get dangerous. He had a bad feeling that something hard to fix was coming. At the mercenary guild, things were quiet. As he sorted bottles, the bartender asked if Lee Sun-min was already placing another job. Instead, Lee Sun-min asked what happened to the Chimera Ogre's body. If it was a chimera, someone had to have made it. The bartender said that was being investigated separately with the Mage Guild. No Chimera Ogre had appeared in his past life, so either no one took the mission or the Mercenary Guild had lost. From the timing, it was likely 6 months after the Chimera was made. Maybe in his past life he had found it himself, but now that he had killed it, the future might change. At the Bhangar Mage Guild, someone greeted the young man warmly. A mage worked through several spells as Lee Sun-min watched. He introduced himself as the Dark Mage Kim Jong-yan. He was investigating the Chimera. Lee Sun-min introduced himself as the one who killed it. After realizing the boy was Korean, Kim Jong-yan asked if his world had gone through a portal crisis. He briefly explained that portals connect to other dimensions and let monsters through. Then he dropped the subject, pleased to meet another Korean from a different world. When they returned to the main topic, his face changed. That wasn't the only reason he was happy, but he kept the rest to himself. Lee Sun-min seriously asked to see the Chimera's body. He needed more clues to get the Devanark armor, so the mage shared part of what he had found. The creature wasn't fully dead, which made a full investigation impossible. Still, the dark mage who made it was probably at least mage rank. Its mouth had been sewn shut, and it seemed to have been made with a savage hunter mixed in to test the Chimera's power. Hearing that, Lee Sun-min thought back to the split corpse and understood why. When he went quiet, the mage noticed the boy didn't care much about synthetic monsters. He stayed completely still. So Lee Sun-min brought up what the mage had said earlier, that he was happy for another reason. Kim Jong-yan said with confidence that the protagonist's causality was a complete mess. A dark mage could open and read someone's soul. He stepped closer, offering advice, saying that if he were in Lee Sun-min's place, he would have fallen into despair or gone insane. Then he asked if the boy understood what that meant. Lee Sun-min answered simply, after death he would suffer forever. The mage then asked why his causality was so twisted, but Lee Sun-min distrusted him, and chose not to answer. To gain his trust, Kim Jong-yan offered to swear a mana oath and never tell anyone. As the mage prepared it, Lee Sun-min grew more unsure. Still, since the man was willing to go that far, maybe this was his chance. In the end, he admitted he was a regressor who had returned to the past after dying. By breaking basic laws and piling up too much karma, his causality had become badly warped. After hearing that, the mage decided to tell him one more thing. Lee Sun-min waited anxiously. Kim Jong-yan started by saying he was strange, not just because his causality was twisted, but because he himself was too. Before he could finish, his words shook the room, and Lee Sun-min felt pain stab into his ears. The mage realized he couldn't say it. It was impossible to tell the boy the truth. Lee Sun-min was deeply confused. If Kim Jong-yan kept talking, he would die. Blood covered the mage's face from forcing out those words. He understood then that the boy's life no longer belonged to him. Shaken by all of it, Lee Sun-min didn't know how to respond. The mage apologized for not being able to explain and asked him to come back another time. Still not understanding anything, Lee Sun-min left in confusion. Then he remembered what had happened with Mercy, how she tried to destroy anyone who stepped into her territory. He turned to leave, but someone called out to him. When he looked back, he saw a woman. As she came closer, she said she recognized him from the Mountains of Mercy. Even then, he didn't recognize her. Annoyed, she introduced herself as Scarlet Lizard. That made him think harder since she looked very different now. After a short exchange, Lee Sun-min told her to stop nagging him. Furious, she punched him with all her strength. Only after taking the hit did he finally recognize Scarlet. She then asked what he was doing at the Mage Guild. He said he just had some business there, but when he mentioned Kim Jong-yan, she paid close attention. She warned that dark mages were already creepy, but that man was especially strange. Only a crazy person would get involved with him. In the end, she told him to be careful where he went and said it was nice seeing a familiar face after so long. As she left, she told him to visit her lab on the 3rd floor if he got bored. She also said to tell her if anyone gave her friend trouble. After waving goodbye, he was alone again. He thought about Mercy's words and the sentence Kim Jong-young couldn't finish. It felt like those people were treating him kindly, in a way that was too strange to be normal. He was sure something was going on, but he still couldn't see what. Too many things had gotten messy, but he chose to focus on what was in front of him. The two-headed troll was an S-rank target, worth 60 million URs. Lude showed up in front of him and greeted him. He said they'd take down the trolls together again, and he wanted to prove how useful he was. The young man said he was looking forward to it. In this second life, he had learned no one could live alone. Lude was a good friend, and just being around him eased his hardened heart. They spent 3 months traveling together and collecting mission rewards. On the last job, they split 50 million URs. To celebrate, they went to drink at a bar, but the bartender told them someone wanted to see Sung Min. It was Xian, captain of the mercenary force. Sung Min and Ludi exchanged a look at that. Everyone knew that famous name. Xian led Flare, a group of over 100 mercenaries, and was one of Bahonyar's 3 SS-rank mercenaries. He was a master at the martial peak, who had perfected the 100 mystic steps of the Sholen Fists. Sung Min had admired him in his past life, and there was one big reason why. When they met, the man introduced himself as Xian, captain of Flare. Xian was classless. Now that the boy had reached the martial peak himself, he understood it clearly. Xian would soon become a supreme master of the martial peak. He said they were both classless, and knew how cruel the world was to people like them. Even so, the boy before him had become a martial peak master at just 18. Then Xian got to the point and asked him to join Flare. He offered him vice captain, second only to Xian. Seeing the boy's confusion, he knew the offer was sudden, so he handed over an item and told him to think it through. The boy's eyes widened when he saw it. Inside the box was a lesser revitalization pill, a Sholen Temple elixir that boosts internal energy. If he accepted, the pill was his. Then Xian handed him a contract and asked for his signature. It looked simple and had no magic on it. He just had to obey Xian's orders, and if he broke the contract, he would pay for it. Xian also promised a greater revitalization pill if he revealed what martial arts he had learned. Confused, the protagonist asked who would ever accept terms like that. With a grim look, the man said anyone who wanted to be a mercenary in Bahonyar had to accept them. Curious, Luda asked what answer his friend gave. The protagonist rejected the offer. It was slavery. Luda saw how bad things were and told him to leave Bahonyar. Depending on what happened next, his life could be in danger because Xian did shady things. And even if the boy stayed obedient, Xian could still make life hard for him. Lude said he once refused an offer at A rank, and after that, no one gave him jobs because they all belonged to Flare. He had to become S rank in another city before returning, but by then, Xian had already become S rank, as the protagonist thought. Lude kept drinking. He had never guessed Xian was that kind of man, even after admiring him so much. Then Lude asked if he wanted to go to Mythor with him. Just then, a man in the bar announced that the Dark Mage's dungeon had been found. It was likely the same Dark Mage who created the Chimera Ogre. Now they were forming a team to clear the dungeon, with Flare leading the raid. A voice said it had taken longer than expected. Even so, the protagonist said he urgently needed a weapon. She handed it over. It was made mainly of mithril, with black iron on the outside, great conductors for mana and Kyle. The boy stared at it, overwhelmed. He hadn't expected something this good. Neville said Lady Selgerus seemed to like him. He explained that the materials used for the weapon were extremely costly. Vega had given extra money to improve the weapon, but the elf had barely used it for herself. Still, Neville understood why she had done it. The protagonist had a strange pull that made people want to help him. Seeing the boy's face, Neville apologized for making it sound so odd. Then he left, telling him to reach out if he needed anything else. Alone again, the young man fell into thought. He wasn't shocked because the idea was weird. He was shocked because it confirmed what he had already suspected. The first time he noticed something strange was at Mount Mercy, though back then he thought it was just luck. But if something really was making people like him more, then maybe every bond and every experience he had was false. While he was lost in thought, Luda walked over. He noticed the odd look on Sunvin's face. If the suspicion was true, even their friendship might be fake. Luda hugged him and asked if he was worried about the dungeon raid. At that moment, he remembered. His fears had started being confirmed when the future changed after he killed the Chimera Ogre. Because of that, the guild searched for the Dark Mage and found the dungeon 3 months earlier than in his past life. And something else had changed too. Xian. He was pleased to see the Rising Star joining the raid. When he spotted the boy, he said this would be an easy mission. In the past, Flare hadn't joined this expedition because they were away on another job. Now they could, since the timeline had moved up by 3 months. Xian also noticed Luda was with him. Smiling, he told both of them to be careful. The dungeon was dangerous, and no one knew when or how they might die. After the orders, everyone moved in single file. Luda caught the hidden threat in Xian's words. He could kill them in the chaos and make it look natural. For a moment, the hero thought about refusing to join because of that. But in the end, the skills hidden inside were too valuable, so he went. It had been 3 months since he came back from the mountain, and he still hadn't progressed. To break that wall, he needed the magical armor Devnark, which could raise even a third-rate warrior to master level. Going back to their talk, Luda said Xian wouldn't dare act recklessly with so many people around. The raid had 27 members total, 1 SS rank, 4 S ranks, and 12 A ranks, along with Flair's mercenaries. Even Baron, the guild leader, had joined. Luda said that with his spiritual sword he'd cut down anyone who tried anything. He had no real reason to join the raid, so he was probably there because he was worried about his friend. Lee Sun-min was deeply grateful, even if it meant Luda was now in trouble with Xian too. Then he remembered something very important. He stopped overthinking and decided to act. The leader announced that the Behender Mercenary Guild was entering the Black Sea Dungeon. They didn't know what waited inside, but they did know they were the best in Behender, so they had to hold firm and be ready for anything. With that, he ordered everyone inside. At first, everything was quiet. The group moved forward side by side. At the front was the A-rank mercenary Jim Chul, a master of external arts whose body was as hard as stone. But in an instant his body was sliced clean in half. The men right behind him froze. They couldn't do anything. Jumchul had been caught completely off guard. His body split into two, and one of his companions was left holding only the upper half. The leader was furious. Then he looked around, saw monsters closing in, and knew it would be a long night. Once they realized the creatures were chimeras, despair spread through the group. Xian saw right away that this raid was off to a brutal start. These monsters were bigger and more twisted than normal, which made them even stronger. Xian cut one of them in half with a single attack. The protagonist saw that he had used the Mystic Steps and Fist technique, and watched every move from behind. After seeing Xian's strength, he knew he still wasn't strong enough to fight him. Lost in thought, he didn't notice a chimera rushing at him. In his previous life, this dungeon had been empty. That meant the dungeon's master might really be here now. Tired and bleeding, the hero realized something was wrong. The battle wouldn't stop, and bodies were piling up. Xian saw the heavy losses and understood they might not be able to finish the raid. Still, he taunted the leader, claiming his own squad was stronger. Luda noticed that through all the chaos, Xian had only protected his own men. Just 1 hour after entering, the raid had already lost 2 A-rank mercenaries. Among the survivors, the only solo A-rank hunter left outside Flair was Tang Masuk. Luda introduced himself to the frightened girl and told her she didn't need to worry. But when she got even more scared after seeing him, he simply returned to Sunvin's side. At the same time, someone called out to the guild leader. A hunter reported that the raid team was badly hurt. Hearing that, the leader prepared his reply. He apologized, but said they couldn't stop now. The main force was still alive, the SS rank and S rank hunters, so pushing on should still be possible. Seeing the girl's fear, he told her she could go back if she didn't want to stay, but if she did, no one would be there to protect her. Looking at the bodies around them, she grew even more nervous, then decided the safer choice was to keep going with the group. Slowly, everyone moved on while watching their surroundings. The place was eerily silent. Some started to think the monsters were only a distraction so the dungeon master could escape. It made sense that the master used chimeras to buy time, but no one could relax over a guess. Then one of the men spotted something ahead. It was a large closed door. It didn't look like a trap, just a door. Even so, the protagonist didn't trust it. Behind the wooden door was a room full of books. Holding a candle, the man said there was nothing special there, just a library. Since the place was big, the leader told everyone to split up and search for clues. But Sunvin felt something strange the moment he stepped inside. He knew this was where the man had found the magic armor that changed his life. Listening from the corner, Sunvin heard the man say that after hours in the cave he found a door. When he went in, he saw a huge library, the same one Sunvin was standing in now. Now he had to figure out which book had led the man onward. After checking the shelves for a while, a door opened in front of him. A staircase appeared and he knew the magic armor Devnark was hidden below. Xian noticed the boy had found the secret passage. He praised him, and the boy instantly grew nervous. Turning back, the protagonist said he had only found it by accident. With an odd look, the captain said he liked people like him. That answer shocked Sunmin even more. Then the man suddenly punched him in the stomach. The protagonist tumbled down the stairs. Xian knew that if the boy wouldn't join him, he had to die. His talent made him too dangerous. Baron was in another room with the captain's men, so no one would step in. But Lude showed up at the top of the stairs, proving he was still there. He had used the spiritual sword technique to take out the guard at the entrance. He was sure Xian had been waiting for the right moment to show his real self, and Lu Zhen knew he'd be next after Sunvin. A moment later, his friend was thrown down the stairs. Xian couldn't believe the two of them thought they could beat him. The hero knew the odds were bad, especially if the other Flare members joined in. Even so, he wasn't giving up. He grabbed his friend and ran. Still confused, he only said they had to reach the lower level fast. The magic armor Devnark, which boosts the wearer's power, was their only shot at winning. Quickly the two reached the bottom. The protagonist looked around fast. Then he spotted the armor right in front of him. While Ludi guarded the lower entrance, he moved toward the rare item. But his friend quickly noticed Xian rushing toward them. He drove a punch straight into Lude's chest. His hand went all the way through Lude's body. The protagonist froze in shock. Xian pulled his hand back out and let the body drop. Before dying, Lud managed to hit his shoulder. Stunned, the hero still couldn't process what had happened. He thought of his best memories with his friend, who now lay dead beside him. All that grief turned into rage, but Zion didn't care at all. As classless fighters, they both knew power was everything. You couldn't trust anyone. Trash could still stab you in the back. The boy tried to answer with a kick. Tired of talking, Zion just wanted the boy dead. After the hit, the boy crashed near a pile of rocks. His weapon was strong enough to block many of Zion's attacks. Punching him in the face, Zion demanded the boy hand over the weapon. When he grabbed it, he noticed it was much lighter than it looked. Looking closer, he realized it was made of mithril. Then he felt something strange nearby. Pieces of the armor started attaching themselves to the protagonist. As Devnark accepted him, his strength began to return. Zion realized it was magic armor. Now the protagonist looked stronger than ever. Uneasy, Zion saw dark energy around him and couldn't tell how dangerous it was. Zion waited for the right moment to strike. By then, the magic armor had fully covered his body. The two stood still, staring at each other, until an explosion broke the silence. Zion had no idea what that dark energy was, or why it suddenly vanished. He threw a punch and told the boy to fight him again. Confused, the protagonist noticed no change in his body or inner energy. Even so, Zion admitted the boy had done well to dodge this long, but he'd die next. Seeing his fallen friend, the boy knew how bad things were. A hand reached toward him to finish the job. Then a mystic creature blocked the attack. Getting Devnark came with a huge price. Even so, the contract with Devnark still hadn't been completed. When Zion tried to attack the creature, he suddenly felt weak and helpless. The sixth sense the boy had sharpened warned him not to fight that thing. A huge sound boomed from underground, and the men started to run. The leader asked if it was the dark mage, but the masked one said nothing, only held up his fingers. Then the leader realized it was a lich. Sensing the danger, one man yelled for everyone to run. But the monster was much faster than everyone there. With one simple spell, it killed Baron. When they tried to escape, they found the exit blocked. The creature told them they were only there because it had allowed it. It was in a great mood that day because it had found an even better offering than the Chimera Ogre. As it moved closer, it spoke about its fate. It said the day of reward for those who believed in it was still far away. This was the Lich Preskin. The fight ended almost at once. The Dark Mage slaughtered everyone, even the dozens of S-rank mercenaries. Baron, a great mage, was split in half instantly, and even Zion was beaten with ease. By then, the protagonist could only wonder how it had come to this. He had believed this life would be different from the last. He thought he had become something more, not just a larva or a cicada. With sad eyes, he looked at his friend's body. Then he realized he had been wrong. He was still just a larva. The creature was terrifying. Meanwhile, the protagonist was chained to a wall. The Lich welcomed him to its workshop and told him not to waste energy trying to break the chains. It let out a creepy laugh as it watched him struggle. Then the monster made a strange confession. It wanted to become a woman. To it, women were amazing because they could do something many alchemists never could in a lifetime. Because of that, it had tried every way to become one, but got lost in magic and gave up its soul and flesh for eternity. In the end, it believed it had found the answer. Even if it couldn't give birth, there was still another way to create life. Hearing that, the hero was stunned. To the Lich, this was a perfect day. The one it had once met, whose karma was twisted, had become a monster. If it used someone like this warrior, someone with warped karma, as an offering, it might get closer to its dream. Holding the boy's face, it revealed what it planned to do. Desperate, the protagonist had no idea how to escape. He watched everything around him, as the Lich prepared the offering. Then the boy's breathing turned uneven. As the Lich used its full power, it sensed something strange. Not understanding what was happening, it grew confused. To it, this should have been impossible. Turning away from the boy, it fell into deep thought. Meanwhile, the boy struggled to breathe more and more. Then it realized the offering had been rejected. The Lich grabbed him by the neck and leaned close. Curious, it asked who he was and why the Demon King of Fear had rejected him. A soul with twisted karma should have been a valuable offering. Desperate, the Lich decided to search his memories to find out who he really was. Confused and shaken, it demanded to see everything. When the boy woke up, the Lich was already gone. Lee Sung-min was relieved to still be alive, but in the next moment, he realized he was completely alone in the darkness. Still, the noises in his head wouldn't stop. He remembered everything that had happened and couldn't calm down. He saw Lud's face again as he died, and the cicada sound that had vanished after the Chimera returned. Still, he managed to move not because of this life's experience, but because of the willpower he built as a third-rate mercenary in his past life. He had made a promise to his friends and he couldn't die yet. With blood running from his eyes, he repeated that promise to keep going. He was used to this. Regret, shame, and self-pity could wait until after he survived. Then, while standing still, he heard a telepathic message. Lloyd, master of the Tower of the Golden Mage, was asking for help. He was somewhere far below the protagonist. Remembering that Lloyd had vanished in his past life, he listened as the man said he needed the warrior's help. Lloyd was badly hurt, couldn't move, and begged the boy to get him out. Curious about the Lich, the boy said it had disappeared. Even so, he stayed suspicious, unsure if any of this was safe. Swearing on his mana, Lloyd promised a great reward if the boy helped him. So the boy kept going down. After a while, he finally reached the place Lloyd had called him to. Lloyd, relieved he had reached the hero, waited anxiously. The ruins showed a huge battle had happened there. Then the boy noticed something strange. Looking down, he saw Xian dead with a hole in his chest. He asked Lloyd what happened. Lloyd said he'd explain the small details later, and asked for help first. Without stepping closer, the boy asked what he could do. The mage said he needed to be taken out of the dungeon. Then, with his index finger, he pointed left, and begged the boy to destroy something there. It was a heart made by Preskin. Since it was extremely dangerous, it had to be destroyed. The boy thrust his spear at the heart, but a barrier was protecting it. As he tried to get closer, the heart changed into something dangerous. Suddenly, claws tried to disappear from his sight. Not understanding what just happened, the boy stood there speechless until he realized the heart had entered his own body. He had gained the black heart. Hours earlier, Lee Sung-min had obtained the heart. As Preskin tried to leave, the Lich suddenly stumbled. He had used a spell that pulled memories out by messing with the mind, but it backfired, and even the Demon King of Fear refused the boy as an offering. That was when the Lich realized he had burned too much mana. Seeing the two hearts before him, he came up with another plan. He decided to use one of the fallen men to restore his mana, but Xian was still alive. Grabbing him by the neck, the Lich poured out his power to refill his mana. After draining two of them, he finally felt better. Then he looked at the third man on the ground and noticed he had only been pretending to sleep. Xian was drenched in cold sweat, shaking at the cruel fate ahead. He managed to break the chain spell, proving he was far stronger than expected. The Lich then chose to use him in a far more valuable way, because of the quality of his soul. Lloyd asks what Preskin plans to do now. The mage realizes the Lich is still carrying out vile, twisted research. After 10 years, the mage had finally tracked him down. It was that same mage who had hunted him without stopping. Knowing he was weakened, he decides to destroy Preskin's body and hunt down his life core. Xian recognizes Lloyd as the Archmage, master of the Tower of the Golden Mage. He says he'll help kill the Lich, but Lloyd tells him the best help is to stay back. He isn't strong enough. The Lich grows desperate. With the offering rejected and Lloyd here, everything had gone wrong. Then he remembers the two hearts. They were incomplete, but he had no better choice. He immediately starts casting a spell. Alarmed, the mage can't make sense of that strange mana flow, but it was the result of Preskin's research. Smiling, the Lich calls it the ultimate life form. A small blast erupts underground. Then a foot appears. Lloyd is stunned as the Lich finally creates a woman. Her body and heart were unfinished, but he still had another heart. He planned to use this incomplete creation to survive, then perfect the other heart later. Seeing resistance was useless, Lloyd decides to erase that thing completely. He unleashes a powerful spell that threatens everyone around him. The Lich orders the girl to deal with that bastard while he casts another spell. The girl waits for the right opening. Lloyd's magic can't even scratch her. Everyone is shaken when his spell vanishes with ridiculous ease. The Lich is delighted. She performed perfectly. Calling him daddy, she says she's hungry. Then she turns to Xian. With one blow, she tears out his heart. That was how the captain of Behinger's strongest mercenary guild, soon to become master of Martial Peak, died. His heart ripped out before he could resist. What came after was complete madness. Once Lloyd sees her power, he panics. Meanwhile, the Lich laughs at the disaster he made. That monster could do anything. The fight went on, and Lloyd used all his magic and mana on the girl. In the end, badly injured, the two escaped. That was everything that happened in the cave. Lloyd can only thank the boy for saving his life. He is also grateful the boy destroyed that heart. After calling for help, Lloyd passed out and saw nothing else. Even so, the boy is still confused about what entered his body. Lloyd thanks him again and promises a reward for what he did. It was basically a blank check from a great mage, but the boy didn't need anything, so he saved that favor. Lloyd still didn't know about the heart. Preskin, master of the Black Magic Tower, had been marked for execution for breaking the rules, and the one who took the mission was Lloyd, master of the Golden Magic Tower. After chasing him for 10 years, Lloyd finally got his chance during that raid. In his past life, though, he died in that cave. Since the one who should have died was now alive because of the boy's regression, someone who should have lived was dead instead. He feels crushing guilt over Lude's death. Lude. He had been like a frog in a well, thinking Xian was the greatest hero in the world. To them, many monsters seemed easy to kill, and what they thought was the sky was only the mouth of a well. There was always someone living under a much wider sky. Now he wonders how strong YG Hoyan really was. Back on Mercy Mountain, he realized he was only a worm, so he refuses to despair over what he lacks, and keeps moving forward little by little. Then a cheerful voice calls out to him. Kim Jong-un says, most of the raid team died, so it's a relief the boy made it back alive. Then he notices the armor and realizes it's an incredible artifact. Curious, he asks to examine it. The boy lets him, since he has questions of his own. The armor is a force contract item that links its wearer to a transcendent, a demon king or a demon god. It skips the normal process and forces the user into a slave contract. Using a diagram, the mage explains that it can raise a martial artist potential, but after death, that person's soul would belong to the demon king. Since nothing happened to the boy after using it, the case was very unusual. The mage says there are two possibilities. First, the boy no longer had the potential to be used. Second, he already had a contract with someone stronger than the armor's master. The mage thinks the second answer is more likely. That makes the boy wonder why the Demon King of Fear rejected him. If the contract isn't active, then the armor can still be used safely like this. With a snap, he removes it from the boy's body, turns it into a bracelet, and says it can return to armor form with mana. The boy then says the Lich had offered him as a sacrifice to the Demon King. The mage says it's amazing he kept his sanity after facing such a being. Smiling, he asks if the boy understands what that means. The boy asks if his soul is somehow above the Demon King of Fear, but the mage can't answer. Then things start to click. The boy also mentions his body absorbs something strange, and the mage identifies it right away as a dark heart. Even so, the boy says he can't feel any different energy inside himself. Prescott had researched the ultimate form of life, and that heart was the result of that work, far beyond the demonic armor. Apologizing that he can't explain it better, the mage says a god might be able to answer. That makes the boy remember Mercy's words telling him to go to Draymore and find Denir, the king of time. Maybe Denir, the god of time, could answer his questions. He thanks Kim Jong-un and says goodbye. As a warning, the mage says he likes the boy a lot and can visit any time. Feeling the pressure behind those words, the boy gets the message. As he leaves, he closes the door. He learned a lot, but now he had even more questions. His next destination was Draymore. But then someone rushes through the hall, calling for Lee Sun-min. Scarlet kicks him in the neck and reminds him she warned him not to get involved with that mage. Rubbing the spot, he wonders why she always hits him whenever they meet. Scarlet angrily says nothing good will come from dealing with that guy, but he says he only had a few questions. She tells him to ask her instead, and demands to know what he wants. His first question is how old she is. She instantly looks furious. That was not something you ask a lady. As they walk, she says he survived the raid by himself. After all that, he still looked physically fine, but his face showed deep sadness. He tells her he's heading to Draymore because he has unfinished business there. Hearing that, she offers to go with him. She says she has business in Draymore too, and since they're headed the same way, it would be nice to travel together. When she sees him hesitate, she asks if he doesn't want her around. Really, he just didn't know what to say. He didn't hate the idea. She was a magic genius and the future master of the Crimson Magic Tower. Becoming friends with someone like her would help a lot. But he couldn't understand why people kept treating him kindly. To him, every bond he'd made so far had been built on lies. He thinks Lude's death may have been for nothing. He has no proof, but he suspects Scarlet may want this trip for the same reason. And if something goes wrong and she ends up like his friend, he knows he would never forgive himself. That's why he doesn't want to travel with her. After saving Lloyd and obtaining the Black Heart, he searched Zian's corpse. A man like Zian, who trusted no one, would keep valuables on him. He found a lesser revitalization pill, a greater revitalization pill, and the secret Shaolin manual of ultimate martial arts. Every one of them was priceless. No matter what troubled him, he first needed to get stronger, so he swallows one of the pills. Then he waits for a change and quietly meditates on his bed. But when he stands up, he feels nothing. Normally, an elixir like a lesser revitalization pill would create internal energy right away. Since nothing happens, he starts to think it might be fake. Then something begins to shine inside his stomach. Something flared up. In short, the pill was real, and his internal energy shot up fast. Usually an elixir's energy bursts out, and the user has to guide it through the body to make it their own. But the protagonist absorbed all the energy from the lesser revitalization pill without doing anything. It was easy, and every bit of that energy became his. So what just happened was probably tied to the heart inside him. Then he looked at the small box. He picked up the greater revitalization pill. He absorbed the energy from both pills perfectly. In pure internal energy, he was now close to a supreme peak master. The only thing that made sense was the dark heart. Even without proof, he knew the lack of internal energy that had always held him back was finally gone. Still, he needed to make use of it. His eyes sharpened as a bold idea came to him. Later, Scarlet asks why he's heading to Braden instead of Dremor. He says they can't travel together after all and apologizes. Since he found a secret Shaolin martial arts manual, he plans to take it back to Braden. Scarlet, seeing how young he is, says markets are full of people selling martial arts books. He explains that he wants to return it to the Shaolin Temple and get a reward. Because her business was only in Dremor, she couldn't go with him. But her face changes right away, and she says she has business there too. It wasn't really business. She just wanted to travel and see the world. She says cities don't suit her, and she'd rather train in mountains. After wandering for a while, she plans to settle somewhere nice. Annoyed, she says she'll take a bath and then join him. The two keep talking, so they were traveling together again. She grabs his head and nods it for him, saying he already agreed. After taking a few hits from her, he accepts Scarlet as his travel companion. They plan to leave a week later, and he tried to see the good side, someone to talk to, and a safer road. Then a strange girl walks up and asks who he is. In the night, the two freeze and watch her carefully. Both of them are confused by what's happening. The girl starts changing, saying that after meeting him, she began to feel strange. Her hands twist into huge, grotesque shapes. She curiously asks who the boy is. Sometime earlier, in the forest, Billix had been thinking Lloyd was truly strong, the kind of genius people talk about. If he hadn't awakened the girl in time, he would have died. She was his greatest creation. But the girl seemed to ignore him completely. He calls out when he sees what she's doing. Since she was awakened too quickly, he couldn't control her well, and she wasn't obeying. The only thing he trusted was the obedience seal, which should stop her from attacking him. Wiping his face, he tells her to go back where she awakened and recover the Lich's heart. That mission was vital for her survival. She was supposed to take the heart and come right back. Once he sees she understands, he orders her to go the way he's pointing. Instead, she runs the exact opposite way. The Lich is left confused, thinking maybe even she doesn't know where she's going. Even though her father told her to go elsewhere, she felt something odd from that direction. Her heart was racing, and she didn't know why, until she saw two people ahead. Somnium turns as he senses a terrifying presence coming closer. Step by step, the girl stares at the outsider with clear curiosity. The boy grows nervous, feeling something strange when he sees her face. Her hands begin changing into something horrifying. Lee Somnium sees the desperation in her eyes, and then her body starts swelling. Scarlet can't understand why her companion is just standing there, unable to react. She casts a spell and fires at the girl. It smashes the tentacles bursting from her hand, but the protagonist feels pain in his heart and knows he needs to recover. Scarlet stares at the girl in confusion. She has never seen anything like this. Maybe this was Preskin's Tremera, the one Lloyd mentioned, and maybe she came for the heart. That girl killed Xeon instantly, and even the great mage Lloyd barely survived fighting her and Preskin. He decides to use his bracelet. If he wanted to save himself and Scarlet, he had to use the armor. A burst of energy comes out, and the suit covers his body. At the same time, the girl readies another attack. Dark tentacles lash out as she rushes him. With his weapon ready, he spots the attack and turns to meet it. He leaps forward, trying to close the gap. He attacks any way he can, trying to wound her. Her fighting style is bizarre, and her blows are even stronger than the Ogre Tremera's. If the elixir hadn't boosted his internal energy, he'd already be in serious trouble. Scarlet tells Somnium to move so she can cast. As she's thrown back, she unleashes a fire spell. The girl notices and tries to dodge, but the hit lands and she feels intense pain. Scarlet says the child has strong magic resistance. She can block most magic, but Scarlet's power is different. Normal resistance doesn't work because Scarlet uses enchantments to form her secret magic. Still, she doesn't expect an attack flying at her. The protagonist quickly jumps in front of her and shields her as flames tear through the area. For a brief moment, he thinks through what he's facing. Remembering Xeon, he realizes this may be the mystic fists of 100 steps. Lloyd had said the girl ate Xeon's heart, so she could gain the abilities of whatever she consumed. Now he was sure she was a monster. The pressure leaves him dazed, but the girl never slows down. She attacks again, and he can't overpower or control her blows. While fighting, she reminds him that she asked him something. She still wants to know who he is. As he blocks her attacks, he's only thinking about how to escape. Getting another spell ready, Scarlet tries to pull the girl's attention. After striking her in the face, Scarlet mocks her for wasting her luck. She keeps provoking her, saying she's really mad now. The girl's expression changes at once. Her eyes catch something strange. Then hands grab her feet and stop her from moving. It was Scarlet's spell. Meanwhile, the protagonist slips in without her noticing. He swings for her face, but she tears off her own legs to break free. He freezes at the sight. After mutilating herself, she starts to fall, then quickly uses another kind of magic to reshape her body. Before they realize it, her legs are already restored. Both of them are furious, knowing this fight won't end soon. In moments, she regrows both legs. Even the burned flesh heals. Scarlet is deeply annoyed, but she knows even this kind of regeneration has a mana limit. If they keep working together and dealing heavy damage, her mana should eventually run out, and they could win. Then the girl shows more of her power. Seeing that amount of mana, Scarlet says to forget the plan. This was much worse than they thought. The battle goes on. The protagonist keeps defending himself, even though he's exhausted. As he falls, Scarlet asks if he's okay, then snaps that he can't die and leave her alone. At that moment, he realizes something has to change. He had already changed the world around him. He became something different in the mountains, but it still wasn't enough for the dream he wanted. A larva is meant to crawl, and if one step isn't enough, then it must take tens of thousands more. He thinks he failed because he was satisfied with only one step. Back in the mountains, he didn't leave just for the maniac's armor, and when he met a wall, it felt too high. In the end, he looked for an easier road and used the demonic armor as an excuse to leave. The cost was huge. He lost his loyal friend, so he saw himself as weak and pathetic, and that was why he had to fight. He understands now that choosing to run was wrong. He feels again the weight of the spear he hadn't sensed in so long. The static hum, the cicadas. He only wanted to stand beside her. No matter what, he wanted to change his fate. More than anything, he didn't want to die. His dream was too big for a larva, but he still refused to let his life end here. None of this was easy, but if he had gained something he never should have had, then one step was never enough. As he reflects on his life, his weapon grows stronger and stronger. The moment he accepts that he wants more, his strike becomes exact. Then the spear pierces the girl's arm. He stands firm to protect Scarlet. He won't let anything happen to her. Annoyed, the girl demands to know who he is. As the spear keeps tearing through her body, Scarlet listens closely, blood covering his face. He gives his name, Lee Sung-min. At that moment, an arrow slams into the girl. She reveals her own name, Ain. With his spear raised, he stays on guard. Blood spills from her mouth and wounds spread across her body. Then she turns and runs. After that brutal fight, the warrior is completely drained. When Lee Sung-min opens his eyes, he's lying in a bed. Beside him, Scarlet is quietly reading a book. She says he was lucky to survive. He'd been unconscious for about 3 days and they were in a nearby village. She called a doctor and used a potion on his outer wounds. When he says he can move just fine, Scarlet is shocked. He had several broken bones. Somehow those fractures healed in only 3 days. It might be the Black Heart. Confused, Scarlet studies him more closely. She asks if he's hiding something. She also wants to know who that monster child was, since he seemed to know more. Telling him not to keep secrets, she demands the truth. At first he stays quiet, but after Lee Sung-min explains everything, Scarlet understands why he kept crossing paths with that psychopath, Kim Jong-un. Her friend had gone through hell and ended up with a piece of mana holding amazing power. Even so, she says he's lucky to have a strong partner like her to help him. Seeing his look, she says she expects a huge thank you. Then he wonders why she didn't run. It was a life-or-death fight, and the child was only after Lee Sung-min. So Scarlet could have escaped any time, but she couldn't leave him there to die alone. Getting up, she says she just couldn't do that. She steps a little farther from him. Lost in thought, she asks if he's ever seen war. After a pause, she says that when she was young, before becoming this hot, a war broke out. Though she doesn't know exactly when or where it began. She says war is cruel enough to steal everything, even the village where she grew up. Everyone precious to her was gone. Lee Sung-min listens closely. She says the loss was hard to live with, so she tried not to get close to anyone. Still, she couldn't leave him alone after seeing all that happen. Looking at him, she asks if he's ever lost someone too. He stays silent. With a small smile, she tells him not to worry. His friend isn't dead. She says she's made it through war and all kinds of trouble so far, mostly thanks to crazy luck. Besides, she didn't even get to use her secret move on that girl. Scarlet knows he'd rather travel alone because he's scared of losing people, but if he wants to protect them, he has to get stronger. Pointing at him, she says he needs to become strong enough that this never happens again. Smiling, he says he already knows. By the end of their talk, he feels a lot better. Scarlet tells him to rest a bit more, then leaves, saying they'll head to Britain tomorrow. He thanks her for helping him. As she walks away, he thinks over everything. Gripping his weapon, he swears to become stronger. His mind flashes back to the night before, to that last moment, when a stronger force burst from his spear, so he knows there's no point wasting time on small worries. As power rises from his weapon again, he hardens his resolve to keep growing stronger. The red-haired girl says they finally made it to the city of Brendan. Excited, she says it's her first time in a central district city, and she's glad they weren't attacked like before. She keeps talking and asks Lee what they should do first, but he says he hasn't decided. She suggests they rest and grab something to eat. When they enter an inn, they're welcomed and take a seat. She starts talking about what to order, but Lee isn't sure either. She admits she's never eaten food from the central district, so she has no idea what to pick. Then she mentions there are some flies buzzing around. Lee notices 2 men staring at them and asks Scarlet if she saw them too. He says the pair looked them over the moment they walked in. She asks why, and Lee says it's probably because of him, which only confuses her more. He explains that when a martial artist reaches the supreme level, they gain origin reversal, so others can't sense their energy. Lee Sung-min has reached one condition for becoming a supreme martial master, but not the rest. Scarlet realizes his inner energy is spilling out, and that's what drew those flies in. One of the men overhears that and asks who she's calling flies. He says she has a sharp tongue, then asks if that's part of her charm. Annoyed, she asks what nonsense he's talking about. The man gives an awkward laugh and keeps flirting, but she tells him to shut up. Scarlet begs him to stop talking and eat somewhere else, because every word makes her want to kill him more. Lee notes that the man gets angry after being called out. Before they can do anything, he grabs his sword and says he'll give her one chance to take back what she said. She refuses and calls him an idiot. Furious, he charges at them with his sword, and the young woman immediately calls for Sun-min to save her. Lee judges him to be about a first-class martial artist. The man attacks while Lee thinks through the best way to handle it. Then another person appears and asks how someone can be this rude in an inn and dumb enough to rush an opponent much stronger than himself. As he speaks, the attacker drops unconscious to the floor. Sun-min realizes he was knocked out by a coin. The newcomer apologizes for stepping in and introduces himself as Nanban Hwan. Scarlet asks if he's from that clan known for its many strong martial artists. Lee says he wasn't planning to kill the attacker anyway. Then Hwan asks if he can join them at the table. They all glance at each other. Confused, Sun-min asks why they're looking at him, and the newcomer asks how old he is. When Lee says he's 18, Nanban is stunned that someone that young is already close to a peak supreme martial artist. He says Lee is insanely talented. Then he asks if maybe he's the little celestial demon YG Hoenn, making Lee spit out his coffee. The man says that's the only monster he can think of who could reach that level so young. Lee asks if he knows the little celestial demon, and Hoenn says of course he's famous. He adds that area only has 3 martial artists called celestial demons, Bak Masin, the berserker Bayat Wonpei, and the little demon YG Hoenn. He also says there's a rumor that the celestial demon is a woman. Then he asks directly who Li really is. He introduces himself as Li Sunmin, and Nanbon admits he's never heard that name. Curious, Li asks what else he knows about the little celestial demon, but Heewon says that's all he knows. If Li wants more, he'll have to ask around. Then Heewon asks Sunmin to fight him. Li is surprised, and the man quickly says he means no harm. He just gets competitive when he meets a strong martial artist. Li agrees as long as it's a friendly match, and that makes Heewon happy. But he adds that a simple fight is boring and suggests a wager. Li asks what kind, and Heewon says nothing serious. His idea is that the loser becomes the winner's brother. After agreeing, the two head to a battle center and get ready to start. Sunmin says he doesn't know if he can live up to his new friend's expectations, but Heewon laughs and says he's being too modest. As Li studies him, he notices the energy around the man has completely changed. He realizes his opponent is very strong, at least peak supreme martial artist level. Both get ready, and Nam-gon starts with a few strange movements. Li notices them but refuses to let himself get thrown off rhythm. He strikes first with the Shadowless Soul Flight strike, first form, but is shocked when his opponent tears through the feints with incredible speed. The fight keeps going, and Heewon presses in with another attack, saying he's enjoying himself. Then he uses an energy-absorbing technique which makes Li tense up. To defend himself, the protagonist uses the Spear of the Nine Supreme Heavens first form along with a soul-chasing lethal strike. Even in the middle of the clash, the opponent shifts his sword, which impresses Li. Nam-gon says that if Li had used a real spear, the attack would have been far more dangerous. He adds that he can't afford to play around, and he has no plans to call someone younger than him older brother. Soamsmin replies that the bet doesn't really favor him anyway, so losing wouldn't cost much. As Scarlet watches, the opponent asks if Li is finally going all out, since martial artists hate losing. They both keep trading attacks as the fight intensifies. After a heavy strike, Li thinks he has his opponent trapped, but the man breaks free. Li doesn't want to admit it, but his opponent controls energy better than he does, so he pours in internal energy to force some distance. The power of the Spear of the Nine Supreme Heavens erupts. Countless after images appear to fool the enemy's eyes. Li knows that out of all those images, only one is real, and he has to find it and face it. But Namboon overwhelms him and declares he won the duel. With a sword at his neck, Sunmin admits defeat. Still, he knows he has a long road ahead. Laughing, Heewon says Li fought very well, and the gap between them isn't that huge. He also praises Li's spear technique, but he says the advanced moves weren't used well, probably because Li hasn't had many chances to test them against true masters. He adds that Li still isn't used to controlling his inner energy, so even small hits are hurting him more than they should. He says this from experience. The young man can fix those flaws fast by fighting more. Namgung then says that since they're brothers now, he wants Li to come with him somewhere, to the Shaolin Temple. Surprised, Li says that was already his destination. Nearby, Scarlet hears them, calls them noisy, and asks if the fight is over. Seeing them together laughing, she asks what is wrong with them and says she doesn't like it. Far away, an old man in meditation says he can feel something coming. The omnipotent god of chaos is drawing near. That is why Namgung Heewon is heading to the Shaolin Temple. Li says he goes there every year around this time to see Master Abbot Bolian. His friend says the heirs of the other three great clans do the same because of an old promise, though he'll explain that later. So the three of them head to the Shaolin Temple together. On the way, they talk about the four great clans Namgung, Jaegil, Moyan, and Tang, and how their heirs are around the same age. Their patriarchs once tried to unite all four clans into one. But when it was time to do it, they started arguing over who should lead. In the end, they left that choice to the next generation. Master Bolian, the Shaolin abbot, was chosen as the judge, and he would decide which heir should become leader. When they arrive, Heewon greets the people there and says he was delayed by other business. Li looks around and realizes everyone present was famous in his past life. Then someone from the Tang clan asks if Li was why Namgung came late. Heewon snaps at her and asks who she thinks she is to call him that guy. He introduces Li as his little brother, a martial master close to the supreme martial peak before turning 20. The girl wonders how someone that talented could be his brother, then realizes Heewon is trying to raise his standing among the young heirs. Li catches on and asks if that's the real reason he wanted a brother. Heewon admits it. Still, Li says calling himself his brother is no big deal. Jaegil cuts in and asks how long they plan to drag this out. Heewon tells the group he's going to see Master Bolian and that Li can rest for now. As they leave, Scarlet says she wishes she were the friend. He lost the fight but still came out ahead. A man calls them over and says he prepared food for them. They hope the temple meals are still good. While eating, Scarlet complains there is no meat, and Li says of course not. They don't eat that here. While thinking, Li reminds himself his goal is simple. Get the secret scroll and return it to Dromore. Then a man enters the room and says the abbot wants to speak with him. As he follows the man, Li is confused. He has no idea why the master wants him, and even in his past life he knew little about Master Bolian. Almost nothing. Except one thing, his nickname was the eccentric Buddha. When Li arrives, the man asks if he is loved by the omnipotent god of chaos. Li is baffled and asks if this is Master Bolian and what he means by that title. He asks him to explain, but the old man says he can't. If he did, he would either die or be erased from the mortal world and become a god in the heavens. Curious, Lee asks where he can find the answer he wants. Then something strange happens, and Lee cannot understand it. After that, he is told to go north. Within 5 years, he must reach the place where the eternal snow never melts. There, he will meet someone extremely important. When the old man returns to normal, Lee asks what just happened, but the master avoids the question. He says it was not him, it was the spirit living inside his body. Lee asks if he serves Buddha while carrying a spirit, and the old man laughs. That, he says, is exactly why people call him the eccentric Buddha. Still, he admits he doesn't know why the spirit used his body to speak to Lee, only that some answers were given. Then he asks if Lee came to return a secret scroll, and Lee says yes. Laughing, the old man says the boy probably expected a reward for bringing it back, and then hands him a superior circulation elixir. Lee is thrilled and can hardly believe it. The Buddha says he's overreacting, and that he's just like Weiji Hoyin described. Lee asks what name he just said, but the old man replies that he heard it clearly. Lee quickly asks if Weiji had been there, but again the old man dodges it, while Lee keeps begging for answers. Seeing how desperate he is, the Buddha starts to speak. Then an image appears behind Lee. It is the future Shaolin, Jae-hak. The old man says they must fight first, and only then will he talk. Soon Lee is on the ground, admitting he lost. He remembers people saying that no matter how long he trained, he still lost miserably. He can't even answer the voices in his head. Losing to Namgung was one thing, at least that felt like a real duel. But against Jae-hak, he feels completely toyed with, and he had never even heard the man's name in his past life. The Buddha asks Hak what he thought of the boy, and Hak says he still has a lot to learn. He says Lee's spear skills are good, but he needs far more experience. He also says Lee cannot control his internal energy well, so he cannot handle large amounts of it. The Buddha touches him and says that is why his internal energy is out of balance. Annoyed, Lee asks what he's doing, and the old man tells the brat to stay still. After tying a piece of wood to Lee's foot, the Buddha tells him to walk, but he can't. The old man says that difficulty is exactly what Lee's body is like right now. They explain the gap between intellect, energy, and physique, saying that even if Lee's intellect is advanced, the energy is stuck in his body. Lee realizes his energy rose from using elixirs, and his intellect improved after learning to send energy into his weapon. The Buddha keeps teaching him, using the wood on his leg as an example. Wanting to learn, Lee asks how he can fix the imbalance in his body and energy. He realizes he will likely need a body restructuring, the easiest fix. The old man then says Jae-hak will help train him in martial arts. The Buddha thinks that if he leaves the boy as he is, Lee will only suffer, and that goes against Buddha's ways. Besides, a child he likes asked him to help when Lee arrived, meaning Weiji Hogachin. Later, Sunman walks with Jae-hak, who asks what he was thinking about after the fight. Lee says he thought he had gotten a little stronger. He reached the martial peak through years of training and recently learned something incredible too, but he still lost to both him and Namgung Hyewon. Hak asks if he isn't rushing himself, and says reaching that level at 18 is already rare. In his view, Lee was just unlucky to face opponents like them, and even he, called the future of Shaolin, still has plenty to learn. Lee realizes he and Hak did not start from the same line, but Hak adds that even he could not beat the little celestial demon. Shocked, Sunman asks if Hak has fought her before, and Hak says yes when she came to the temple. Curious, Lee asks why Weiji Hoyin came there. Hak says the demand she made sounded like pure arrogance coming from a 17-year-old girl, but no one could rebuke her, because her presence was so overwhelming that everyone simply accepted it. Hak says the result of their duel was shocking. He could do absolutely nothing, and lost even worse than Lee did today. Unsure, Lee asks how strong Weiji Hoyin might be now, and Hak says he can't say for sure, but he believes she has already gone beyond the supreme martial peak. Then Hak asks what Sunman's relationship is with her, and Lee says they are only friends. His only goal is to reach her level. Hak says now he understands the boy's urgency, and concludes that what Lee lacks most is experience. With time he can fix that. He warns that Lee will face many defeats and much despair before reaching her, but he will be ready. Lee says he already knows despair well. He often feels crushed, and even then getting back up is never easy. He thought he was finally catching up to her, but he is still far behind. While he was still crawling, Weiji Hoyin had already flown far ahead, so determined he asks to fight Hak again. Later, Lee shows up with a swollen face and says he plans to stay at the Shaolin Temple a little longer. When Scarlet and Hyewon see him, they do not recognize him at first and ask who he is. After learning he fought Jae-hak, Namgung is stunned. He says Master Bo Liang must be going senile, because he refused to let him fight that man. Curious, Sunman says Jae-hak is clearly strong, but he has never heard of him and wants to know more. Hyewon explains that even though the 4 great clans are famous across area, they are still below the 10 great sects. Then he says the 3 biggest rising stars of the orthodox sects are Chui Gul, Chung Myung, and Jae-hak. He adds that the sect leaders are busy raising their top students, secret weapons, who usually never leave their sects. Namgung asks if Lee plans to stay at the temple, saying he wanted to bring him to his clan. Lee says he'll talk to his brother about that later. Scarlet says if he's staying, then it's time for her to leave too. Lee asks where she's going, and she says she doesn't really know, she's just going to travel. She liked this place, but doesn't think staying would help her. Then she playfully teases him, asking if he's sad to be apart from his amazing friend. But then she turns serious and asks why he pushes himself so hard, training every day just to keep losing. She asks if he'll be okay without her. Then she slips a bracelet onto his arm and says it's tied to her soul. No matter where he is, if she wants to see him, it'll send a signal. She says Bak So-go got one too. Before leaving, Scarlet tells him to train hard so that next time he can be the one who saves her. Watching, Namboon wonders why stuff like this never happens to him. The next day, Scarlet and Heewon say goodbye. Before leaving, Lee calls out to Scarlet and asks why she's so kind to him. A little confused, she gets tired of hearing that question again. She says they've already talked about it, but since he's still worried, she'll answer one more time. Scarlet says he caught her attention from the first time they met, even though she normally doesn't get close to people. But after traveling with him, she saw he's a really good person. She says seeing him work so hard makes her want to cheer for him. She likes teasing him, and she knows he's sincere and handsome too. Lee laughs and asks if she ate something bitter, which leaves her confused for a second, but she ends by telling Sun Min not to live like a weakling and to always keep his head high. He agrees. Later, Lee starts preparing himself and decides that while he stays at the temple, he won't use his spear or demonic armor. He chooses to leave behind both his weak mindset and his gear, and even sets aside the superior circulation elixir Master Bu Lian gave him. He remembers the Buddha's words that in the land where the snow never melts, he'll meet someone extremely important. That makes Lee remember he promised to meet Wu Jihoyan again in 6 years. Sun Min believes the person from the prophecy is Bak So-go, but with only 5 years left, he wonders how far he can go. Jae-hak comes over and asks if he's really giving up the spear and armor and why. The Buddha answers that using those tools during training wouldn't be right. Hak explains that martial arts are about using the body, but the thing guiding it is the heart. He says the heart fills the body and turns into the energy it needs. Then he tells the boy to truly watch Shaolin and experience it himself. Lee thinks he can still hear the cicadas like the sound is stuck in his ears and decides he'll deal with that before leaving. During training, Hak says the boy's basics are strong and show how hard he's worked. Still, the spear art he learned, though advanced, feels messy. The boy admits it's because he ran away. No matter how much he trained, he couldn't improve, so he gave up and focused on simpler techniques instead. Hak says if basic triple sword techniques alone could make someone an advanced martial artist, there'd be no point in learning higher arts. They keep fighting while talking between blows. Lee says that's why he won't run anymore. Hak tells him the path of martial arts has no end. His job is to keep finding what can still improve. He says Lee isn't a genius, real geniuses were already flying while he was still crawling, so he must not give in to despair. Hak says he once thought he was flying too, but after seeing the little celestial demon, he realized he wasn't even close. Sun Man asks what someone like him still crawling on the ground is supposed to do. He then reflects that Wu Jihoyan and Bak So-go weren't great teachers because they only knew how to teach from a genius's point of view. Jae-hak feels like the better teacher, since he was raised by countless monks and learned over 72 martial arts. When Lee tries to strike Hak, he gets punched in the mouth, and the man says his senses are still mixed up. On top of that, he's not used to energy circulation yet, and needs to improve it. His understanding is still weak too, so he has to work even harder. Lee says that day he realized how small he really was, but he didn't run. He kept training the Supreme Spear of the Nine Heavens like his life depended on it. He trained his internal energy too, but it was hard and progress came slowly. He sharpened his 5 senses and finally brought them into balance. Whenever he felt lost, he trained even harder. Time passed, seasons changed, and he still couldn't beat Jae-hak, not even once. So he chose to study Shaolin itself and learn from Hak. As he watches, Lee thinks the world is huge and he is tiny, but he still wants to rise into the sky and see it all from above. Then someone interrupts, asking if he'll ever climb out of the well. It's Master Bu Liang. He says Lee has changed, which surprises the boy. The Buddha says martial arts could let him live peacefully inside that well, but asks what he truly wants. Sun Man says he wants to see the world, and the old man replies that anyone can do that, so Lee says he wants to fly above it and see everything from there. Bu Liang says that's a big dream for someone still so small. Lee answers that he does want to dream, but flying isn't just a dream to him. The master asks what he's learned in these past 6 months, and Lee says he's learned how to crawl the right way. Saying that's a good start, the old man tells him it's time to learn to walk. More time passes. After over a year at the temple, Lee is now 20, and he asks Jae-hak something. He wants to know why helping him isn't a burden. Lee says one of his biggest flaws is still his weakness, even after getting stronger. He thinks helping him probably doesn't do much for Hak's own growth, but Hak says that's wrong. Their matches helped him a lot. Through those fights, he was able to review everything he'd already learned, and there's no limit to what he can still learn, as he aims for a much higher place in life. Then he asks if Lee doesn't have that same dream. After hearing that, Lee starts to understand why he asked that in the first place. Maybe part of him was still trapped in his past life. He still doubted people's kindness, and was afraid to move forward. He had kept thinking everyone's kindness came from some strange charm. Hack's question about his dream leaves him deep in thought. He says his real goal now isn't just getting better at martial arts or earning Luigi Hoyen's acknowledgement, but to stop running from himself. Then he goes to the master and asks what else he knows about the blessing. The old man says he's finally brave enough to ask. Lee remembers first meeting Master Bo Liang and asking about the being helping him, then realizes maybe what he really feared was the blessing's effect. The Buddha says it's been 2 years since he came to the temple, and asks why he's only asking now. Sun Man admits he was scared of a truth that used to haunt him, but now he doesn't want to run anymore. Bo Liang says he likes that look on the boy's face, and explains that one effect of the blessing is making others feel more compassion toward him, but it only changes how people first see him. Lee is confused, so the master explains that it mainly affects first impressions. If people truly disliked him, they still would have left him. So Lee realizes the bonds he's made are real. He thanks the old man. The master then says he can remove that effect. After that, no one will naturally form a good first impression of him. That way Lee could build relationships without feeling guilty. After thinking it over, the boy says he accepts. Sometime later, Sun Man meets Huyen again, and Huyen jokes that maybe he's decided to become a monk, though he still has hair, so maybe not. Since it's been so long, Nam Guing suggests they go have a drink, then suddenly throws something at his brother, and tells him to react fast. The boy catches it, then complains that the prank was cruel. Huyen says his friend has grown much stronger, and congratulates him on reaching the supreme peak. Then he mentions that Lady Moyen married Jigel Tarian, and even said she hated how loud and arrogant Nam Guing was. After that, Nam Guing trained like mad to get over the heartbreak and reach the supreme peak. Even then, he says he's still not satisfied, and asks how things have been for his friend, especially whether he liked training at the temple. Lee says he did. Looking him over, Nam Guing says he's changed a lot. Huan says that strange feeling he had when they first met is gone now. Still, from the start, something had felt odd in his heart. He even jokes that he thought he might be into men because of how strongly he felt about his brother. After that, they just keep talking like normal. A year later, when Lee turned 22, he left the temple. Before he went, an old man gave him a letter to deliver to the leader of the Mount Hua sect in Dromore. Sun Man got a mission, and the timing was lucky, since Dromore was also where the temple of the temple god stood. Tha Folju wonders if prophecy was involved, so he decides to summon Neville. Right then, the agent appears and asks what his master wants. The protagonist says he wants to buy information. He asks about the Phantom Sword, Daepijun, and Baksogo the Lightning. He also wants news on Waiji Hoyan, the little celestial demon. Neville says Baksogo has been helping the poor and taking on missions for them. Because of that, she has gotten pretty well known, and she was last seen in the great city of Rubes a week ago. As for the Phantom Sword, Daepijun has been building his name through challenges. He's traveling around to duel martial artists from famous sects, and he even went to Mount Hua. Hearing that, the protagonist studies the crystal ball and thinks it over. Since he's also headed to Dromore, he may run into Daepijun on the way, but he still wants to hear about the little celestial demon. As he waits for Neville's answer, a smile spreads across his face. Neville says Weiji Hoyan has gathered followers, thanks to her strength and charm. She has 20 in total, and every one of them is at least martial peak or stronger. So many groups are staying on guard. He adds that the blood celestial demon Bakmosin rules the far north, and Weiji Hoyan's group is marching there for a clash. Neville thinks Bakmosin, who has ruled that region for ages, is more likely to win. The hero doesn't agree. He believes Weiji will be the one who wins. Still seated, he keeps staring into the crystal ball. He realizes it's been 8 years since he last saw Weiji Hoyan. Then he awkwardly notices how beautiful she has become. After a moment, he catches himself and realizes his thoughts are getting strange. He never met either the little celestial demon or the blood celestial demon before returning. And in his past life, Weiji Hoyan hid herself as a man, while now she openly lives as a woman, so her personality may be different too. That makes him worry about her fight with the blood celestial demon. He wants to head north at once and help her. But they were only supposed to meet again in 2 years. He remembers her telling him to make her his goal. Because of that promise, she would always stay his goal, so he decides to keep moving forward, sure that she can survive this battle, and wait for him at the top. Certain of that, he focuses on keeping his promise to grow stronger. As he walks through the forest, another thought creeps in. He feels like he's already broken one promise. Meanwhile, Weiji Hoyan puts a hand on her body. In the end, she complains that her breasts still aren't as big as she wanted. Then someone calls out, asking if she's awake. A man tells her she should rest longer. She turns to him and tells him not to call her miss, since she doesn't see them as her subordinates. They can follow her if they want, but they shouldn't expect anything from her. After that, the two keep walking side by side. She notices everyone staring at her with curious eyes. That look reminds her of how people watched her back when she was the young master of the demonic cult. Thinking of some missing men, she mutters that she could just kill all those damn worms. Then someone asks if she is the little celestial demon. Bakmeeson steps in front of her and says she looks eager to fight him. She answers that she wants to see how strong her fellow blood celestial demon really is. With a hand on her chin, she notes that her Kali was unlucky to be found by her so easily. Seeing her arrogance, Bakmeeson questions whether she can actually beat him. Before the fight starts, she suddenly asks which hand he uses to hold his fork. It's only a taunt. She says that's the hand she'll leave attached. At Mount Hua Sect, a guard asks the protagonist why he has come. Holding the item out, he says he's here to deliver a letter from Master Bullion. The guard quickly apologizes and escorts him to the sect leader's quarters. Once that errand is done, the protagonist plans to find the god of time, Denner. But then someone calls out and asks if he's the boy from the Mercy Mountains. It is Dak Bijun, and the protagonist recognizes him at once. Glad to be remembered, he talks with the man who says he'd never forget what happened on that mountain. He says that was the hardest time of his life, and he'll remember it until he dies. Even so, he wonders how he was recognized so easily, when he had been under vision prohibition back then. The old man says he remembered the boy's internal energy. The talk goes on easily until Dak Bijun tells him to finish his business in the sect first, so they can speak again later. Nearby, the sentinels wait impatiently, clearly annoyed. The boy leaves, while the old man stays behind, leaning on his sword. Something about him seems off. His hands won't stop shaking on the hilt. He drops to his knees, sensing something wrong inside his body. Then a monster appears behind him, the child created by the Lich Preskin. Inside Mount Hua, someone welcomes the visitor with a polite greeting. The sage introduces himself as the sect leader. Li Sanmei introduces himself too and says he came to repay a favor for Master Boliang. As he hands over the letter, he mentions that the Murim Alliance leader stepped down, so Master Boliang was being considered for the role. When the letter is opened, the sect leader sees that the elder refused the offer. Tossing the paper aside, he says he expected that answer. Then he changes the subject and says the disciples told him the boy knows the ghost sword. Li explains they met earlier right at the sect entrance. Sangha says the ghost sword asked for a duel but he had no plans to accept. The hero asks why. Sangha says he likes fighting strong opponents and doesn't mind duels, but the ghost sword is too dangerous. Later, when he returns to Dapujin, the boy asks if it's true he uses dark magic. The old man laughs and asks if Sangha told him that. After Dapujin admits it, the boy grows curious. Dapujin asks if he has ever hit his limit before and Sangha confirms he has. Then the old man says the boy is too young to understand that kind of wall while he himself is getting old. Even with internal energy slowing age, he says you can still feel your strength slipping away. He sees the boy doesn't understand what that feels like, that despair of depending on dark magic and throwing away a martial artist's pride. Ashamed, the old man falls quiet, then tells the boy to get out. He doesn't want him seeing that side of him. Sangha leaves without a word, knowing he has nothing to say and choosing not to pry. He goes to find Denir's temple, the one Mercy mentioned, and stops at a small shack. Inside, he meets the god of time, Denir. He's shocked to find that Denir looks like an ordinary child. Puzzled, the boy asks if Mercy sent him because he had become troublesome. He guesses Denir knows he crossed time to be here. As expected of a god, Denir sensed that right away. Introducing himself properly, Denir says he is the god of time, so things like that are obvious to him. Naturally, he feels uneasy around someone like the hero, who broke time's rules and disturbed the world's flow. Not fully understanding, the warrior listens as Denir explains. He isn't living this life as if it's his last. He's changing things, meeting the same people, eating the same food, and repeating life differently. Denir says even the smallest change can grow into something much bigger, like a snowball. For example, Wiji stopped dressing as a man and is now facing the blood celestial demon, something that never happened before. Denir angrily says the hero's existence alone is enough to twist that world. There are already many differences, and they will only keep growing with no end in sight. Just by existing, he is warping the world's order. The protagonist answers that he chose to return after awakening something within himself. Even if he asked, a god of time wouldn't tell him everything. Gods aren't all-knowing or all-powerful. They're just living beings who can still die. That's why they stay silent or lie, because telling the truth would put a target on them. At those words, the protagonist's face suddenly changes. Then Denir senses the apostle's presence, and because of that, he says this topic ends here. After apologizing, the apostle vanishes from the scene. The protagonist wants to know what just happened, but Denir avoids it unless he's willing to visit Judas. He says neither God nor mortal can answer that. Confused, the boy asks if learning the truth is impossible. Denir says no and tells him to seek Enverus. He is the one who escaped the mansion of the dead, a special case, though different from the protagonist. After giving that clue, Denir tells him to leave. Before going, someone asks for a trial. At once, the god's gaze changes. Seeing the hero's real motive, he guesses the boy already finished Mercy's trials. Even so, he says the boy won't get what he wants. This trial won't be training like Mercy's. Anyone who survived Denir's trial could kill the protagonist in an instant, and every one of them went mad and died. After Denir threw him out, the protagonist left the shack. The god told him to clear his head before coming back. He went back to rest like Denir said, but the village felt terrible. Dapujun had ambushed the Taoist Sangha at Sangmang and killed him. From his memories, he knew Ghost Sword and Sangha never fought in his past life. The next year, Dapujun was supposed to face Wuji Hoyun in a dungeon and die there. That was how it originally went, until someone changed everything. As he walked, he reached Mount Huasek without noticing, but a man stopped him. The guards were in formation, chasing Ghost Sword, who used dark sorcery to kill the sect leader after being denied a duel, so the protagonist couldn't keep going. One desperate subordinate said someone had been seen talking to Ghost Sword yesterday. Once they thought he might be an ally, everyone got ready to fight. Because of the regression, someone was dead and Ghost Sword was being hunted, but the protagonist didn't know if he should blame himself or even what he really felt. Still, he had to protect himself and find Ghost Sword right away. In the middle of the clash, someone called his name and said it was surprising to meet him there. Kim Jong-un called it fate. The mage stopped the fight and said he knew the young man well. The area was sealed off for now, but the boy kept trying to enter, so everyone assumed he was there to help Ghost Sword. Kim Jong-un asked if that was true, and the protagonist didn't give a real answer. The two simply stood there facing each other. Then the mage decided to go with Lee Sung-min. To everyone's shock, he told them to let the pair pass. He asked for their trust, saying if the boy showed any threat at all, he could cut off his head. The protagonist thanked him for helping. Then he asked about Doche Baijun, but the mage dodged it and said he expected something strange. A corpse nearby showed clear signs of dark sorcery. The skill was called Vital Drain, an art that steals a person's energy. No wonder people called him the demonic sword. Byosuke Baijun did this, and now Mount Hua wouldn't be the only group after him. The whole era would want him dead. Even heaven's favor wouldn't save him. As they spoke, a crow landed on the mage's shoulder. It was his familiar, returning from scouting. With the bird back, Kim Jong-un learned something new. He looked at his friend with a grim expression. He said the Taoists of Mount Hua would be delayed. After blocking their messages, he asked to speak with the protagonist alone. Even martial masters would just be drained by Vital Drain and make the enemy stronger, so the mage was helping the boy purely out of curiosity. He wanted to see how this would change the flow of life. Those words made the hero suspicious. Then a voice holding an instrument asked if they were done. Dupik had just finished fighting some men. Even exhausted, the boy refused to give up. He rose and used the fifth stance, the supreme spear of the heavens. His opponent waited calmly. Then his face shifted when he sensed something off. The strike wasn't strong enough to hurt him, and it slipped away. With just his sword, he smacked the boy on the head. That technique was clearly too much for the young man's body. With a lump on his head, he lay there too weak to rise. Now, in the forest, the warrior finally faced Doche Baijun. The old man sensed him in the dark, and after a quiet pause, the boy said he had something to ask. He wanted to know what the old man would have done if they had met at the sect entrance, and how things might have gone if he had never explained why the leader refused his challenges. After a long silence, Doche Baijun finally answered. He would have given up. Back then, he thought he was simply too weak to challenge the leader of the greatest sect. Later, he learned it wasn't about strength, it was because of his sorcery. Since he couldn't face him openly, he broke into the sect at night and got the fight he wanted. His face was covered in blood and his eyes had a cursed look. The old man said the world was huge, and that leader was the strongest person he had ever fought. So to him, it was a perfect battle with a satisfying end. The young man was stunned. He remembered his friend in the mountains and everything he had been taught. Then he closed his eyes as he sensed the strange thing before him. Realizing the Taimiwas had died because of him, and now Doche Baijun had become this, the old man told him that even if that was true, those choices were still his own. There are too many things in this world no one can fully know, so the boy couldn't carry all the blame. But he still felt responsible, and couldn't accept that answer. Seeing how stubborn he was, the old man thought the boy was too full of himself. The protagonist knew Doche Baijun was stronger than him. Too many people across different lives had suffered just because they crossed paths with Lee Sung-min. Even so, he still held his spear for his own sake, but he was sure every death tied to him would stay on his shoulders, and he knew that weight was almost impossible to bear. Even then, he meant to face the demonic sword and kill him. Knowing the fight would be hard, he asked Kim Jong-un to call the Taoists of Mount Hui. Doche Baijun was much stronger now, after absorbing the energy of more than 10 people. Sword in hand, the old man wanted to see how much the mountain boy had grown. The hero realized he had turned into something far more terrifying. In the dark, the old man said the boy was still young, and he was ready to fight. Looking at that dreadful face, the hero understood. Doche Baijun was a vampire. This vampire, tied by blood to the demonic sword, was either incredibly strong or simply not trying very hard. A vampire can escape old age by drinking the blood of stronger beings. Even so, he was still an old man at heart. Then the fight began in full, showing what both of them could do. Doche Baijun was highly skilled and knew how to guard against heavy attacks. But even if he was a lesser vampire, that didn't make him weak. He carried the power of a transcendent vampire master, so lowering your guard was never an option. The vampire rushed in to strike. The boy answered with a soul-purging assassin thrust, trying a new attack. The old man's sword shook in his hand as he lost balance. Then he suddenly stabbed it into the ground. At the same time, someone sprang forward in one huge leap. He drove his spear toward Doche Baijun, but with incredible speed the old man dodged it. Reading the boy's intent, he lunged back at him. The boy panicked at how fast the vampire was. He gripped his spear tightly and spun it around his body. The old man attacked again, but the boy slipped away. Then, before his enemy noticed, he pierced his chest and threw off his balance. Confused, the old man couldn't track the boy's movement. The boy had mastered the new techniques of Lee Kang-won and Bok Sogo. Blood in his eyes, he aimed his spear at the enemy. Not wasting the moment, the old man gripped his sword with one hand and swung at Sung Min. With several quick steps, the boy prepared the supreme spear of the nine heavens with the hidden serpent strike. Unable to read those movements, the old warrior waited for the blow. His vampire eyes could catch things normal people never could, but even he didn't expect the violent strike. Power burst up from the ground itself. The old man laughed and said he never thought the spear would come from under his feet. If he had dodged even a moment later, his head would have been pierced. The protagonist's anger kept rising, clear in his savage stare. Deokbjorn realized that ignorant mountain boy had grown a lot. As they fought under the rising red moon, the old warrior suddenly said he had invited the boy. The boy was confused by that. Moving closer, the man said he had invited his talent. Feeling him approach, the boy readied his spear, but he still got wounded in the arm. As he fell, Deokbjorn stood before him like a shadow. The protagonist struck again through the darkness, only to realize his spear had been broken in two. Stunned, he demanded an explanation. The vampire paused and began telling his story. After leaving the mountain, he grew desperate over his aging body. He didn't want to grow old. He wanted to keep going farther, but his body couldn't follow. He had trained with the sword for 50 years and once dreamed of becoming the strongest in the world. But his body failed him, so he searched for another way to beat age. That was why he chose to become a vampire. Laughing, Deokbjorn said he knew someone was waiting for reinforcements. He wanted them to come fast so he could drink their blood and reclaim his youth. Hearing that, the hero gathered all his anger. Using his ring, he released all his power. He had truly respected that old friend. The vampire grew excited, seeing they still hadn't reached the peak of the battle. Now he knew fighting that boy would be even more fun than he expected. When a martial artist reaches the top, they can pour their energy into a weapon. That's called an energy sword. It boosts attack power a lot, and a master can slice steel like it's nothing. If they go beyond that level, the energy takes shape. That's called an enhanced energy sword. It's far deadlier than a normal energy sword, and can kill in one hit. Still, there is a way to block it. Enhanced protection energy. It wraps enhanced energy around the whole body, and guards against an enemy's power, but Sun Min can't use it. His enhanced energy is still incomplete and came only from insight. Even with no clear way to win, Lee Sun Min refused to give up. He attacked any way he could. Even exhausted and gasping, he never paused. No matter how many times he was struck down, he got back up. But the vampire was far too fast and vanished from sight. Then he appeared behind him. Sun Min felt him there, but he was still too weak to stop him. The spear's power ripped through the air. For a moment he spotted an opening in the barrier and struck, but the enhanced protection blocked his spear. Deokbjorn could keep taking hits with that energy protecting him. One clean hit to the head, though, could still kill even the moon vampire, protection or not, and the skill gap between them was huge. As he thanked fate for surviving this long, his spear cut through empty air, leaving a deadly opening. Between masters, even that means death. In less than a blink, Lee Sun Min felt in his bones that this was the end of his life, yet he was still alive. The demonic sword stepped back instead of finishing him. Only when he saw that crazed smile did Lee Sun Min realize the demonic sword was just playing with him, and that made his blood boil. For 4 years, Lee Sun Min trained with the Shaolins and fought Jai Hack every day. His martial arts became steady, and he reached the supreme peak. For someone his age, that's almost unheard of. He wasn't weak at all. He had just run into monsters stronger than him. Facing geniuses, he'd need lifetimes to catch, plus the memories from his past life left him with a deep inferiority complex. Life would have been easier if he had settled for being average in an average world, but his time with the Shaolins helped him push past that weakness in his heart. Meanwhile, the fight kept raging. Lee Sun Min may have gotten stronger, but he still felt weak, and that was the truth. His real problem wasn't just weakness. He couldn't bear the lives lost because of his own pride. Still, the demonic sword kept toying with Lee Sun Min. In that moment, the hero understood just how bad things were. That's why he kept training harder, because he refused to stay weak, because he didn't want to live with shame, and because he wanted to crush that inferiority complex for good. Using the last of his strength, the hero attacked. He forced himself closer to an enemy who felt untouchable. The protection around that body kept growing, but Sun Min still wanted to change. With his ring in hand, he unleashed all his power and stabbed into his enemy's chest, leaving the vampire stunned. Even Lee Sun Min didn't know how he had pulled off that strike. The vampire clearly felt the spear hit. His legs lost their footing, and he staggered. Seeing the spear buried in his chest, he was shocked. He couldn't understand how that attack got through. Lee Sun Min felt the tension in the air and asked himself the same thing Deokbjorn did. He had no idea how he did it, and the answer flashed by, then disappeared. That trance-like thrust was faster than the demonic sword's blade, and pierced the protection. But Lee Sun Min still didn't understand it. He thought it might be another sudden awakening, like when he first touched enhanced energy. At the same time, his opponent was writhing from the pain. He tried every way he could to pull free from the spear. Sun Min, desperate, didn't know what to do next. The old warrior said it felt like he had tripped over a stone. A boy at Sun Min's level should never have been able to land that thrust. After tearing the spear from his chest, he charged the talent before him again. That spear strike was stronger, faster, and quieter than even the blade of Tua Samha. He knew that if death came, his blood wouldn't be enough to heal him. so he gripped his sword even tighter. His sword turned bright blue, and he urged the boy to show him more. As he moved, his blue aura lit the sky. Dojok Bijun wanted Sun Min to reveal the power he himself had never reached. The innate energy core is power a person is born with, but using it means death or losing nearly all their life. Since he was using that power, he would die soon, and the protagonist could have just run and left him there. But Dojok Bijun's eyes burned with joy and passion. After seeing those eyes, the hero couldn't run. Dojok Bijun wasn't some puppet demon of sorcery. He was a seeker chasing truth and trying to break his limits. Sun Min knew the old man had lied about envying his youth and talent. He was really someone who had run from his own inferiority while pretending to overcome it, and for that Sun Min would use his spear with everything he had. If he could recreate that miracle strike, he'd give a great martial artist a proper death. By then, the old man had no strength left, and blood poured from his mouth. Before dying, he said he was disappointed in the boy. Growing weaker, he said the blow that killed him should have been stronger and grander than Sun Ha's. With the spear in his chest again, the old warrior still couldn't understand why he had ended up like that. Sun Min stood beside him and listened to his last words. Before he could finish, his hand fell limp. Dojok Bijun was dead. The protagonist felt the weight of what he still had to carry. In that world, the demonic sword died smiling. Kneeling beside him, the boy asked for forgiveness. Worn down by so much death, he blamed himself for every loss. As he cried for the fallen, he noticed a light coming toward him. It was Sogo, and he ran into her embrace. She told him he had grown a lot. The protagonist was stunned to see his friend there in the forest. Suspicious, he pulled back for a moment and asked why she was there. She stayed beside him in silence. As she gathered flowers, she said she had heard rumors about the demonic path. The hero listened closely. She placed the flowers on Dojok Bijun's body. Then she gently closed his eyes. Grieving for her friend, she said nothing more. Sun Min and Sogo hadn't met in around 5 years, and now they were reunited in a place like this. Sogo had already sensed that the mountain boy had grown much stronger. She said she felt demonic energy, watched his fight with the demonic sword, and saw him losing. Even if he had died, she wouldn't have stepped into that fight. With a faint smile, the boy said he understood. She was a martial artist too. Still, he believed he should have died. He had spent the whole battle retreating, and only a lucky strike let him win. Despite the gap in strength, the demonic sword had been consumed by ambition and pushed himself past every limit. But Sogo said their friend was wrong. Confused, the boy asked what she meant. She explained that his sin was harming innocent people, and nothing could excuse that. She didn't know his pain or his reasons, but none of it mattered. After all the unforgivable deaths he caused, the two stood there in silence. Sogo's sense of justice was very different from the protagonist's. Sun Min said he had chased the demonic sword out of responsibility, and with a sad look she understood. She said she belonged to the Murim Alliance, a place where her kind of justice could be tested, and where she had learned useful information. Knowing that man, she had wanted to stop him, but she hadn't known the protagonist was there. With a little blood at his mouth, he called out to Sogo. Curious, he asked how he seemed to her. She said Sun Min looked completely different, far above the boy she had met before. In the end, she said she was happy to see that change. Then she remembered she still had a mission to finish, and had to leave. The moment she said that, Lee Sangbin focused on it. Sogo was hunting the little celestial demon Yji Hoyan. The moment he heard that name, his eyes widened. As she left, she said she couldn't tell him anything more, without promising anything. She said they'd meet again soon. Before Sangbin could answer, she vanished. Left alone, he thought about Sogo's mission. Most likely that was the mission that got her killed in his past life. Joining the Murim Alliance to follow her own justice wasn't something she'd easily give up. At that moment, the boy realized he could never persuade her. After the demonic sword who used dark sorcery was killed, rumors spread of a young hero, the one who slew a vampire at the Supreme Martial Peak under the full moon, now called the Demonic Spear. When he returned to the shack, a voice sounded shocked. With full resolve, Lee Sangbin asked the God of Time to give him the trial, even if it cost his life. Seeing that determination, Daenerys was speechless. The warrior wanted only one thing: to finish that trial. Looking at him now, Daenerys could tell he had come prepared, almost like a madman. The pain waiting for him in that trial would be worse than anything he had ever known. But the protagonist didn't care. He told Daenerys to start the trial now. Sensing the young man's pain, the God of Time gave a small smile and decided to begin at once. In the next instant, they were in a completely different place. It was the world inside the protagonist's consciousness. Training there wouldn't affect Sangbin's brain. Only his mind could be trained, and he couldn't use the status window or any skills. To get out, he had to rely only on memory and talent. He would stay there until the sand in the hard glass ran out, and one trial lasted a full century. So with no way to take it back, he was trapped in that empty place for at least 100 years. The God of Time felt the young man deserved that punishment. He might even stay longer than a century. Demanding says he can remain there as long as he chooses. When all the sand falls, he gets two choices: return to the real world, or turn the hard glass over. Each flip adds another 100 years, but once he turns it, there's no backing out. He has to stay until the sand runs out again. Only 3 out of 10 survived. The rest went mad or died. Many clear the first 100 years, get overconfident, and flip it again. Then the second century starts breaking their minds. So the God of Time wanted to see how long the protagonist could endure. With those final words, Denair vanished, and the century began. At first he felt fine. He thought endless time to grow stronger was a blessing. But no matter how much he moved, he never got tired, hungry, or sleepy, and that soon became torture. He missed hunger, thirst, exhaustion, and most of all pain. Whatever he tried, he felt nothing. He never thought the lack of pain could hurt this much. Once he understood his situation, despair hit him hard. This was more than pain. He had no idea if he was training right, and no one was there to correct him. Wuji Hoyan, Bok So Go, and Jai Hak were gone. Even when a spear thrust felt wrong, he couldn't be sure. Whenever he thought all this suffering might be pointless, he nearly lost his mind. Lee Sun Min needed proof he was doing it right. Instead, he felt completely lost. There were no answers, and when he thought most of the time had passed, he checked the hard glass and saw that not even one grain had fallen. Outside, his body still stood before the sun god. Denair had already started thinking about what to do with it. Sure, he would fail. Then he sensed something strange. Looking closer, his eyes widened. Cold sweat ran down his back as he realized he was dealing with a true madman. Only 10 people had ever taken that trial, and all of them cleared the first century easily. The protagonist knew he had less talent and less will than they did. That thought pushed him back into his memories, reminding him why he never gave up. In the end, he was still just a larva, so he couldn't complain about crawling. Back on the Mountain of Mercy, he had already accepted that he would keep crawling until he passed the geniuses. And if a wall stood in front of him, he would break it and make his own path. Compared to that, his Shaolin training was nothing. He just had to recover and keep moving. Even a huge rock becomes sand under the ocean in time. Yet the supreme spirit of the Nine Heavens still didn't seem to improve, no matter how much he trained. In the end, he decided people don't really change. That's why everyone hides behind masks. No matter how much he thrust or moved, he gained nothing and never felt tired. A spear exists to pierce and suppress, part of a powerful monk art, but that wasn't his path, so he sank deeper into confusion. With less than half the time left, he still didn't know if he'd done what he was supposed to. Still, he refused to stop. Even if he left now, nothing would change. He became sure he had to kill the weak part of himself. Kneeling down, he asked forgiveness for killing the Lord when someone this weak should never have been the one to do it. Change was hard, but he wanted to destroy the weakness inside him, even if that weakness was all he had. He steadied himself and stopped grieving, because time was almost gone. He trained for 200 years without improving at all, still just a classless man. He couldn't count how many times despair made him want to quit in those 200 years, but he was done running and still wanted to change his future. With a tired face, he turned the hard glass again. That weight was his hesitation. And with that turn, another 2 centuries began. His face showed pain spreading through his whole body. When he came back to himself, much more sand had fallen. He had probably gone insane for a while before regaining control. He felt that many times before, likely disgusted by his own weakness. Still, as long as he didn't stay broken forever, all that time meant nothing to him. That next 100 years went much better, because at least it felt like he was moving forward, even slowly. This time, he trained the mystical art of the Violet Dawn and the flight of the shadowless soul. Having a goal let him feel better for a little while. But after another 2 centuries, he still hadn't improved, just as he expected. So he added 3 more centuries. That first century had felt like hell, but now it almost seemed easier. By then, he was sure he had gone mad living there. Still, after sensing a little progress, he aimed higher and tried to recreate the strike that killed the demonic sword. Of course, he couldn't copy it perfectly, so he added another 400 years. Before long, 1,000 years had passed. By then, nothing in his eyes showed what he truly felt. He only stared at the wall of the supreme peak. Then he laughed, realizing it had taken him just 1,000 years to find that structure, and added 500 more. If finding the wall took that long, crossing it would take even longer. So he kept training day after day without stopping. After nearly 1,500 years, he finally copied the strike that killed the demonic sword. But it was only a weak imitation. He couldn't match that power or speed in any other spear move. He wondered when he would finally become a supreme peak master. Then he looked at the hard glass and added even more time. The god of time grew more shocked by Sangbin's actions. To him, Sangbin was completely insane. But Sangbin had only one goal: to finish the trial he had been given. In the end, his eyes showed his full refusal to fail. Denair kept one thing hidden. That realm of consciousness slowed growth so badly that even geniuses struggled, which made despair come faster. The people before him had all been stronger than the hero, yet none lasted past 1,000 years. Even so, this young man endured far longer. In the end, he trained for a staggering 2,100 years. When he returned, Denair wanted to know how he survived that long. As he realized his own weakness, blood dripped from his nose. His brain was overloaded. Taking in 2,100 years of memories at once was no easy thing. Denair was stunned to learn the warrior had gone insane several times and still recovered. Someone so simple-minded should have quit because of his lack of talent. And Denair understood that might be exactly why he lasted 2,100 years. The others were like eagles soaring freely, but birds that fly don't know how to walk, much less crawl. Lee Sun Min had crawled from the very start, with weights on his back. He was used to being knocked down and standing up again, after falling into despair again and again. All that suffering had made him numb to it. The god of time was truly shocked by the man before him. Still, he knew that wasn't the only reason. The protagonist's body felt terribly heavy after being without one for 2,000 years. The last survivor of 1,000 years couldn't even remember how to speak, so Dinner returned his memories up to the present to help fill that gap. At once, the protagonist was flooded with memories. His face changed as key facts came back to him. He still remembered that pathetic old self, but he was thankful anyway. The god of time's trial had only trained Sangbin's mind, not his body. But with the memories and mindset he gained there, getting stronger from now on would be easy. He then asked Denier to look after him. He had nowhere to stay, so he wanted to remain in the house until he got used to his body again. After 2,100 years of isolation, he needed help recovering. Amused, the god of time told him to do whatever he wanted. A year later, at the Shelvan Temple, the whole area was overgrown. There, a practitioner trained without rest. Jahonk was stunned when he heard a voice he hadn't heard in a long time. Beside him, Sangbin looked curiously at the man, but his face turned to shock when he saw the boy next to him. The protagonist already had a perfect plan in mind. Confused, the warrior said he didn't understand what had happened to him. Clearly, a lot had changed in all that time. Jahonk had heard the rumor that Lee Sun-min was the one who defeated the demonic sword. He didn't believe killing a great martial artist, the one who had slain the Mount Hua sect leader, was just luck. The hero had reached supreme peak in the middle of the year, and the fighter was curious about the power he had gained. Even while trying to dodge the topic, it took him a while to admit what he really felt. Looking into Sun-min's eyes, it seemed like he had lived absurdly long. The two stayed quiet for a moment. Then the warrior tightened his grip on his weapon, making his intent clear. Jahonk wanted to fight Sangbin, but the boy was already ready for that duel. He said that's exactly why he came. Just as they took their positions, a voice ordered them to stop. The old man warned that if those two fought, the Shaolin's future could be ruined. Hearing Master Bullion, both men stopped. The old man was impressed by how much the boy's martial arts had grown. Sangbin had turned up for one reason. He wanted to see how close he had gotten. He was set on reaching as near to Wuji Huayang as he could. Master Bullion said the girl's talent should have taken her much farther already. Jahonk waited for him to finish. The old man added that even Huayang at 17 should still be well ahead of Sun-min. But Sun-min had expected that, so he wasn't surprised. He never thought his current strength was enough to match her. Still, the realm of consciousness had raised his power a lot. With this body, he planned to climb even higher. There were only 2 months left before the dungeon opened. Jahonk asked him to stay the night, but Sangbin left after taking back the demonic armor and his spear. He still had to learn about the Black Heart, stop back Sogo from dying, find Inverus, and restore his martial power. With so much to do, he couldn't waste any time. His first goal was finding Inverus, whose twisted causality was different from his own. The man had escaped death itself, so Sangbin hoped he could help. He went searching for the one person who might have answers. From Erebus's info, the merchant called Inverus had been seen in the Forest of Sleepers. That forest was feared because the ghostly screams drove people insane. No one knew what was deep inside, since everyone avoided the monster-filled woods. Sangbin couldn't believe a normal merchant would come here. Regular people would lose their minds from the screams, but to him they were just annoying noise. Nothing in the forest could truly shake him. Then something strange appeared behind him. Startled, he swung with full force. With a few blows, he crushed every monster that came at him. At the same time, some mysterious figures watched from far away. They wondered how he was killing the monsters so easily. They judged him a supreme peak master, but not from a demonic sect since he had no demonic energy. Knowing they couldn't beat him alone, they moved to call for help, but Sangbin had already spotted them and simply asked if they knew someone named Inverus. Terrified, the men pulled their weapons to protect themselves. A dart shot straight at him. He dodged it, confused by the sudden attack. Even so, the men kept fighting with everything they had. One of them sent a fierce blast of fire at him. Sun-min didn't care. He knew he could take it all. The attacker was stunned when Sun-min copied the same move with a wave of his hand. Walking closer, the boy tried a calmer approach. There was no reason to fear him, but one look from him was enough to scare the man stiff. Then he explained, they were deaf, so if Sun-min wanted to talk, he had to write on the ground. That made Sun-min understand why they had reacted so strongly. So they started talking by writing in the dirt. Then, without warning, a warrior dropped from the sky. He slammed down hard onto the ground. Shouting, he called the two men idiots for what they were doing. They had no right to share tribal info with an unfinished outsider. This man was one of the tribe's powerful elders. Soon after, Sun-min realized the others weren't actually deaf. Still, all he cared about was Inverus. The elder angrily declared he would tell an outsider nothing. The men saw there was no choice left but to fight. After dropping the elder, Sun-min tried speaking to them again. They were shaken, still unable to believe he had beaten the elder. Figuring Inverus was tied to their tribe, he told them to take him there. The tribe lived in the Forest of Sleepers and used a drug that protected them from the endless screams. Soon they reached the village, a place packed with wooden buildings, though some of the men clearly disliked bringing him there. A man stepped forward and introduced himself as the chief, Kazuya. The two stared each other down, trading sharp words while judging what to do next. The chief was no weakling. He was a supreme peak master who had gone through origin reversal. Annoyed, the old man demanded to know what Sun Min wanted so badly that he killed an elder and threatened 2 youths. Sun Min kept saying he came peacefully and never meant to kill anyone. Still, he wasn't going to stand there while someone tried to kill him. That answer left the chief silent for a moment. Putting anger aside, he realized too many of his people would die if they tried to stop him, so he allowed Sun Min to stay as a guest. Sun Min accepted, but he stayed alert. Their truce was set. Then Sun Min asked if the chief knew Inverus. The chief told him Inverus had left the forest 2 months earlier. They had no clue where he went after that, but before leaving, Inverus had said someone would come asking about him. His last request was that they guide that person to a certain place. After a short walk, they reached another part of the forest. Kazuya explained that countless trees had risen there to make a wall. Sun Min gripped his spear and prepared to break it. He poured all his strength and will into the weapon. Then he hurled himself at the wall. The force was so great the chief had to shield his eyes. But even after that strike, Sun Min looked desperate. Raw strength alone couldn't break the barrier. Not even Inverus had crossed it. Only the tribe chief could open it. So the old man chose to open the wall for him. He gathered all his power and opened a dark passage. Even then, the chief didn't know what was inside. He only knew an unbelievable power lived there, and even a supreme peak master would struggle to get through. Before he could finish, Sun Min stepped inside. Kazuya could only stare as the boy vanished. The non-stop screams would shatter anyone's sanity. It was a brutal mental attack, and just like Kazuya said, even a supreme peak master couldn't bear it. But for 2,100 years, Lee Sung-min had gone through something even worse in the realm of consciousness, where his mind was broken and rebuilt again and again. That left him somewhere between sane and mad. As he walked, he heard a strange voice trying to speak to him, and something flickered through the smoke ahead. That power let him in because it had mistaken him for someone else. Curious, it asked if he was the one who had gone back in time. Not knowing what was talking to him, Sun Min stayed quiet. Then another voice told the monarch of the void to stop acting like that. A girl changed her form and said he was scaring the boy. Sun Min had no idea what was happening. Finally, he asked who these two strange beings behind the wall of trees were. Before he could say more, the girl introduced herself. She was Ruby, Inverus's familiar, and said she had been waiting for him all this time on her master's orders. She added that her form looked like this because of her master's odd taste. Curious, Sun Min asked what the creepy thing behind him was. Ruby said it was the monarch of the void, a remnant of the great demons. 400 years ago, he had been a mighty demon who ruled over more than 100 others. Now he was only a spirit with no body. Lee Sun Min asked why Ruby had waited so long in a place like this. She said only her master could answer that, since he also had twisted causality. Even as his familiar, she couldn't track his exact location. That made Sun Min impatient. Since the master could sense Ruby's location, she said the best choice was for him to follow her. He couldn't understand why this was getting so complicated. And he still didn't get why that weird thing was standing in front of him. The monarch of the void only knew one thing. The one who returned would come looking for him someday. He wanted to leave the forest with a regressor. People in the forest tribe spoke of a good god, but that only made the monarch laugh. As long as the tribe's blood remained in the forest, the final seal would stay, and even he didn't know whether the path had an end. Even after all that, Sun Min still had plenty of questions. Ruby repeated that he might eventually meet her master, Inverus. The only issue was how to carry a demon with no physical body. Even her master hadn't explained that part. Suddenly, the monarch of the void started changing form. Sun Min watched carefully. Then the spirit lunged at him with its power. Even Ruby didn't know what the monarch was trying to do. He planned to steal Sun Min's body after being trapped for 400 years without one. It was trash compared to his old body, but he meant to use it anyway. Ruby waited to see how it would end. The monarch of the void laughed wildly, then realized he had flown straight into the bracelet on the boy's arm. Confused, he couldn't understand what had happened. The great monarch of the void had been rejected and sealed inside the bracelet. Sung Min's mind was too strong after 2,100 years in the realm of consciousness. On top of that, it might have been some blessing from someone moving behind the scenes. Still, the only way to get answers was to meet Inverus. The bracelet brought back memories of when his friend Lude was still alive. He had shared many memories with that item, and now he couldn't use it anymore. He wanted to throw the monarch out of the bracelet, but the spirit panicked. Before Sung Min could leave him behind, the monarch tried to buy his way in with a gift. He claimed that when he was a great demon, he had gathered huge war spoils over centuries. Ruby backed him up, saying he really had once been rich, with a vault full of treasure and strange items. Sung Min thought it over. In the end, Ruby and the monarch of the void became his companions, and the three of them moved on through the forest. The familiar planned to wait for Master Inverus somewhere quiet. It sounded fine, but first the men had somewhere else to go. The girl asked if that place was dangerous. His face already gave him away. He was heading to a dungeon first. Dungeons are strange places filled with powerful magic. Each one follows its own rules. When dungeon monsters die, their bodies vanish and loot appears instead. And the stronger the monster, the better the reward. If you beat the dungeon master, you get a huge prize and the dungeon closes. Ruby asked if he was really going there. Calmly, he said yes. Soon he stood before a giant stone. 2 months had passed since meeting Rubia and the Monarch of the Void, and Erebus had helped him find the dungeon. In his past life, he took the Stone of Regression, and now the Crimson Stone should be at the entrance. One touch would send him somewhere inside, but for a moment he wondered if this mission was even possible. Still, after coming this far, giving up made no sense, so he reached for the stone. The moment he touched it, he was teleported. He and Rubia entered the dungeon together. Selman suddenly heard something familiar. He turned and found a huge man beside him. It was an ambush. The man stayed quiet, then he asked who the boy was. A second later, he realized this was the Demon Spear, the one who killed the Demon Sword. Grismo apologized, saying he mistook him for a master from the demonic faction. In his past life, Grismo had reached the supreme peak and was later killed by Wuji Hoyan. The protagonist had come to stop the little celestial demon. Grismo warned that she was dangerous and had strong people with her. The dungeon rewards were huge, and if she got them, an unstoppable demon could be born. So they had to stop her for everyone's sake. The Demon Sword Daka, the Lonely Grandmother, and the Iron Fist Demon had entered as her followers too. The Miram Alliance also had Bak Sogov, the Drunken Expedient, the Ace of Expedients, and the Supreme Celestial Swordsman inside. They were all somewhere in the dungeon. Grismo said Wuji Hoyan had to be stopped now and asked for his help. After a short silence, he said he'd do all he could for justice. Grismo smacked his back, saying that was exactly what he'd expect from the hero who beat the cursed demon sword. This was Lee Selman's first dungeon. Since every dungeon is different and most are full of strong monsters, they moved carefully. As they went deeper, Grismo sensed something ahead. Both stopped at once. A strange light filled the protagonist's eyes. Someone had arrived, and Wuji Hoyan also felt the presence of a boy she hadn't seen in a long time. When they met, neither spoke. They only traded heavy looks. The one before them was the little celestial demon. But Grismo felt something was off. Then Bak Sogo stepped out of the darkness. The big man lit up the moment he saw her. But they should have looked closer. Something about her wasn't right. A closer look showed something strange on her face. Grismo instantly grew desperate. She rushed him and kicked him with full force. Blood ran from his lips. Rubia realized it was a doppelganger, a monster that copies someone's looks and movements. Worse, it had just used a soul attack, without even having a soul. Then the creature's focus shifted. Its red eyes locked on the protagonist. He instantly activated his bracelet and armor covered his body. He was furious that his friend was being copied like this. Rubia panicked when she felt his rage. The creature started to move, and suddenly a storm of attacks came at him. They all aimed for the protagonist. He had killed the old demon sword, and that day Bak Sogo had told him how much he had grown. He could never forget those words. That was why he trained for 2,100 years to make her proud and hear that again, but not from some monster wearing her face. So he fought without holding back. He told Grismo it was only a copy, a doppelganger that could mimic martial arts, but it was still far weaker than the real Sogo. Normally doppelgangers copy looks, not skills. Rubia said not to worry. She would guide them now. Another voice mocked the arrogant little puppet. Fed up, the hero told both of them to shut up and stop arguing. He had a bad feeling. If they had run into Sogo's copy, they might find someone else's next. Salmon immediately thought of Wuji Hoyan, and panic showed on his face. Elsewhere, a Miram Alliance member, Jiu Chundo, was killed. His subordinate fought desperately to survive. The Alliance warrior unleashed all his anger at the cursed monster before him. That monster looked just like the little celestial demon. She stood there ready to attack again. Seeing her, he assumed she had learned new tricks. Determined, he tried to bring justice to the people she had killed. He roared that Wuji Hoyan had to die. Then the fight began, but the little demon was far stronger. Without even moving, she struck once. That single blow killed him on the spot. She said nothing. Her eyes showed nothing at all. Then a thought crossed her mind. It had been 9 years since she last saw that person. On the ground lay a copy of Lee Selman. She quietly said she was glad it wasn't the real boy. Then she noticed her own appearance and thought she should have cleaned herself up more. Looking over his body, she realized just how much stronger he had become. She admitted she'd be truly sad if he died here. Then she turned away, leaving the body behind and hoping Lee Selman would survive. Laughter echoed through the dungeon. After a hard fight, Bak Sogo still didn't look very tired. She already knew she had been battling doppelgangers. The one she beat was Juk Chundo's copy, the weakest of them. She found a pure elixir and realized it had been inside the copy's body. Now unsure where to go, she needed to find the other Miram Alliance members. In her current state, she knew she couldn't beat Wuji Hoyan or any of her followers. Then two people approached. They were followers of the little celestial demon, the Lonely Phantom, and the Iron Fist. Both saw that the girl was alone. The magic stone dropped from Bakozo's doppelganger was a crystal packed with great power. A voice called him an idiot for asking why the protagonist didn't just eat it. That would only make things worse because his core was unstable, and his ki and body were out of balance. Still, his heart seemed perfect, so pure that even among great demons, none had one like it. The protagonist was still confused by all this. Ahead of him, the Yokoball of the mountain kept walking calmly. Then he stopped for a moment. On the ground lay a man missing one arm. It was the Beggar's Sect member known as the Begging One. The protagonist recognized him as one of the top 3 disciples. He had lost his arm after meeting a copy of the Lonely Phantom. and taking dozens of sword strikes at once. Realizing he was dying, he begged for potions. After drinking them, he thanked them for saving him. With an elixir, they might even be able to attach his arm again. Grismo introduced the boy as Demon Spear Lee Summon, the one who defeated the demon's sword. The drunkard stepped closer and said he'd heard plenty about him. Baksogo talked about him a lot, and he claimed the two of them were close. The hero said a real friend should help when needed, then wondered what kind of bond the drunkard had with Sogo. The two started trading jabs, each saying he was closer to her. Grismo just stood there in silence. The protagonist suddenly felt his face getting hot. A voice teased that someone must like the ghostly girl, and that watching two grown men fight over her was funny. The drunkard then realized he'd been rude to someone who had just saved him with a potion. The voice kept laughing at how much fun they seemed to be having. That sweet little love story had blinded them completely. Then one of the little demon's followers stepped forward and introduced herself as the evil old lady. Grismo spotted her at once and recognized her. Annoyed, she claimed she could beat him in one hit. Someone understood she was another of Wuji Huiyan's followers. Rubia then announced that her analysis of the dungeon was complete. The fight was about to start. She showed everything she had gathered. The blue dot was the protagonist, yellow dots were other people, and red dots were monsters. With that info, they had a chance to win. But 3 yellow dots were moving fast, which likely meant a battle. The hero focused on Rubia's display. The location was right beyond the wall, so one of those dots might be Sogo fighting Wuji or another enemy. After thinking it over, he decided to break through the wall. Meanwhile, the other two kept fighting the evil old lady. Then they felt a huge burst of energy. Grismo warned the old woman to get ready for a massive hit. That wall wouldn't fall to normal force, so the protagonist pushed his spear to its limit. Energy began gathering around it. His power had reached a much higher level, and he knew he had used this technique before. The spear kept building up bright, intense energy. Grismo knew it was time to attack. The old woman panicked, sensing what was about to hit her. The protagonist poured out all his strength until his face went pale. The enemy couldn't defend herself anymore and only screamed. Then the wall exploded, and smoke poured through the cracks. Everyone froze, confused by what had just happened. Sogo stared in shock. The hero moved to save her from the enemies and stepped in front of her as a shield. Shaken, she could only think about how long it had been since they last met. At the same time, status updates for each person appeared. Lee Sun-min wouldn't let anyone hurt Beg Sogo. The other two men grew wary. They didn't know him and assumed he was from the Murim Alliance. Even while hurt, the girl was stunned that her friend had broken that wall. With something in his hand, he said he came to help. It was the gift from the Buddhist ambassador, saved all this time so its power wouldn't fade. But he couldn't let this go on. So he bit into the sphere with all his strength. The moment he swallowed it, his body changed completely. The men watched closely, fully alert. Even with only half, his inner energy started coming back, proving Huju was right. The stronger one would handle the girl, while the other rushed the cursed boy with his sword. Elsewhere, the two fighters got ready. The enemies leaped in to close the gap. Lee Sun-min raised his spear to block. The enemy's sword was powerful, and he controlled his skills with deadly force. Seeing how much stronger the boy had become, Bakusogo was impressed. Still gripping her spear, she knew the fight wasn't over. Even Van Mist thought that. Despite his lower level, this guy was tough to face. He didn't seem like a returnee, but he clearly had trained for a very long time. Then Sin-min jumped at his opponent, who met him with his drawn sword. They clashed hard, with no time to breathe. Neither could land a clean hit on the other. Sin-min twisted away from the sword coming at him. Meanwhile, the man's eye flashed with strong magic. He suddenly started slashing in every direction. The protagonist kept both hands tight on his spear. He pushed forward, sprinting at full speed without slowing for a second. The bearded man laughed and taunted him as he came in. Using the 9,000 martyrs in 3 seconds, he tried to wound his enemy. Even then, the sword moved in wild, sudden ways. The man was confused. He didn't know that spear style or its rhythm. Then a brutal strike smashed into his shoulder. He lost his balance for a moment and fought to stay standing. The boy had struck upwards so fast it caught him off guard. But to him, the fight was still just fun, and he burst out laughing. Judging by his martial arts alone, the young man had the skill of a master with years of training. Meanwhile, Baksoba was locked in a fierce fight with the other follower of the little celestial demon. Wanting to finish Sun-min fast, the man stopped holding back. There were 3 things the venomous demon didn't know. The boy before him was a friend of his beloved master, that the skills he admired in his heart had been refined by that same master, and that his beloved master would be the one to kill him. The bearded man couldn't survive the fatal strike from his master, never even learning why. The moment Wuji Huiyan showed herself, she killed him in a second. The other man saw the little celestial demon arrive and was horrified that she had just slain the venomous demon, her loyal follower. Even if she didn't care for them, they still saw her as their master. Their one wish was for her to rule the world so everyone could witness her reign, so the other man couldn't understand why she killed someone who followed her so faithfully. Wuji Huiyan showed no regret at all. Furious, he realized arguing was pointless now. After all that, Morang Tekken declared the little celestial demon must die, but he died instead. That Wuji Huiyan was only a copy, but the 2 men didn't know that since they'd never seen dungeon doubles before. In the end, the demons who followed Wuji Huiyan all died. Meanwhile, The copy moved toward the two of them. Bak Sogo told someone to run right away. She pointed to the hole in the wall and said the drunk and the mountain Yukpo were beyond it. Some had to bring them back for the next fight if they wanted any chance at all. The protagonist said Sogo was faster, so she had to be the one to go. With a faint smile, he asked her to do it. Unable to refuse her comrade, she finally agreed. As a last move, she tossed him an elixir. Before leaving, she begged him not to die. The protagonist believed he wouldn't, or at least hoped so. Face to face, the two men shouted at each other. In his past life, only Weiji Hoyan came out of that dungeon alive. When people asked about the others, she simply said they were all dead. Everyone assumed the little celestial demon had killed them herself, but now someone knew the truth. The band on Weiji Hoyan's arm looked like an artifact that could grow or shrink in firepower at high speed. This time, the protagonist might stop it from happening. Bracing himself, he prepared for the worst. Still, he refused to give up and chose to face his fear. Weapon in hand, he went at the enemy, but that force was too much and it felt like his arm might tear off. Then the enemy blasted him far away with one hit. Sogo the drunk and the mountain yacht bull were still busy fighting the old woman, so he had no idea if things would change once they came. Another strike sent the protagonist flying even farther, but his will to live was overwhelming. He had to survive this. He had made promises to many people, and he had to endure. He had to keep fighting. He had to find any way he could to bring that woman down. His body was weak, but his mind wasn't. Drawing on his 2,100 years in the spiritual world, he tried to recall everything he had learned. He needed to attack from the front and aim for the weakest side. The little celestial demon didn't react. Still, she noticed the protagonist getting ready to attack again. He was high above and tried to get as close to her as possible. Holding his spear, he realized the fight could go on forever. Even so, he wouldn't give up and started planning his next move. A voice called him a brat and asked if he had noticed something. That monster wasn't fighting seriously. She was just playing, using that band with all her power and experience. The copies mimicked the original, and he knew Weiji Hoyan normally didn't use martial arts. After thinking a little more, he realized she only used martial arts on opponents worth it. So even if it looked like child's play, the protagonist had become someone worth her time. He thought of Sogo then and prayed she wouldn't come back. He understood now. He was fighting a monster. Elsewhere, they were beating the evil old woman while Bak Sogo shouted that she had to help those men. There was no time to lose. She had to get back to the other fight. If the men refused, she would return alone. Then something strange showed in her eyes. The drunk grabbed her with his one good arm and said following her plan would be suicide. They had already underestimated the enemy, and beating Weiji Hoyan would take 5 times more strength. The drunk said their best option was to retreat. Grismo argued the only escape was killing the boss monster, but the drunk revealed a scroll taken from the old woman. It was a cruel choice because it meant leaving a friend behind. While they argued, Bak Sogo lay unconscious in the man's arms. Then a bright light burst from the hole. At the same time, a regretful voice asked for forgiveness as the warrior kept fighting the little celestial demon. Blood poured from his mouth and his pupils were wide. His enemy kept pressing him, never letting him rest. She rushed around at incredible speed. The hero had to watch every direction, center, opening, right, and left. The voice helped him tell where the next attack was coming from. Even with that help, he still couldn't follow every instruction. Fed up, he told the voice to shut up already. He knew that if he died, he'd rot in that place, and Bak Sogo still hadn't returned. The voice claimed she had betrayed him. If he hadn't come in to save her, he wouldn't be in this much danger. But he didn't care if he died in Sogo's place. He was sure something had happened to stop her from coming back. Besides, if he had never met her, he wouldn't have survived the mountain. The voice answered with a dark laugh. Even after that speech, the boy still couldn't die here, so Anne decided to help, and a transformation began. Not understanding any of it, someone simply accepted the help. This was real power enough to crush every enemy. Richard Hamey watched what was happening in front of her. That power was easy to use as long as you had a purpose, and it could be called anywhere, anytime. Light burst out from his armor. It was part of the voice's spiritual power, and the boy's heart accepted spiritual energy with ease. His wounds started closing, and even his arm improved. The mood shifted, and the original's proud, curious nature had been copied too. At that moment, the copy saw him as a true rival. The protagonist felt like that power might make his veins burst. Meanwhile, the voice told him to hold on. Across from him, Weiji Hoyan prepared her power in a rage. It was the first time he had received strength like this, but it still wasn't enough. The protagonist refused to give in. He wanted the voice to give him even more power, though he didn't know if he could control it. Even if a weak body shouldn't hold such power, he recognized it because he had reached it once before. If he could return to the level he achieved in the spiritual world, that doppelganger, without hesitation the hero demanded more and more power. His spear kept growing stronger and fired spells in every direction. Weiji Hoyan rushed in furious, but her eyes widened when she realized what was happening. All at once the protagonist blasted her away. She slammed into a wall, debris flew everywhere, and she was left stuck in the crack. The 9,000 immortal songs were being used for the sacrifice. The protagonist only had to hold on a few more seconds. As the world let out its force, more explosions erupted. Angry, the little celestial demon got back up and attacked again. Power gathered in one of her hands. He never expected to be struck, but the attack came right at the protagonist. This was the strongest power he could use, with 6 seconds left in the sacrifice. To his eyes, power was pouring from his whole body. With that strength, the protagonist tried to bring justice himself. Wee Ji Hoyon took the hits and was flung even farther back. Her red eyes turned even darker. Then a bright light burst from every part of the dungeon. Even the protagonist looked shocked that he had won, and the copy answered that, standing still. Pain hit him. Sweat ran down his face, and his veins swelled. He had done this 9 years ago, and after thousands of years he had kept running while thinking about the little celestial demon. With no real confidence, he just wanted to know if he had grown even a little stronger. The voice mocked him for that, and said he still needed someone else's power to win. Having power and knowing how to use it were not the same. Then the voice warned him to get ready. The next step was pulling back the borrowed power, and that could be deadly. He said he was used to pain, and the power started leaving him. A horrifying look spread across his face. His eyes bulged, his pupils widened, and the pain was unbearable. Suddenly, his whole body began to glow. He screamed as the power left him. A girl stood beside him. Touching his stomach, Robia asked if he was okay. His body had been fighting that pain for a full hour. Even the special elixir the woman gave him wasn't enough to heal him. Without it, he might have died. So once again, he owed his life to Bixoga. He had nearly died. His limbs, joints, blood, and kepi had all burst and torn into wounds. Even unable to move, he tried to stand. He said there was somewhere he had to go. Then he started walking without balance. Looking over, he saw stones falling onto the evil old woman. Beside him, Rubia said she could sense mana resonance and movement magic there. An escape scroll had moved 3 people. Realizing Sogo had escaped the dungeon, he felt he had done what he came to do. Even so, he kept moving without turning back. Looking at the map, he headed toward the boss. His final goal was Wee Ji Hoyon. He staggered, but never gave up or stopped to rest. Rubia kept arguing with him, but he said nothing. Then the hero lost balance and fell for a moment. He was too weak to keep moving. For 2100 years, and all through those 9 years, he had run this way, risking his life because of the words of a 13-year-old child. That was why he wanted to show Wee Ji Hoyon his effort, and shout that he had grown stronger because of her. Now, he had very little time left. The hero's eyes caught something ahead of him. Then he saw Wee Ji Hoyon, and his face changed. His childish wish to show off his growth vanished at once. He saw her movement, a step more perfect than anything he had imagined. No doppelganger could copy that, and it was what he had wanted to see all this time. The one before him was the real Wee Ji Hoyon. She stood there with perfect moves and unmatched power. The girl realized he must have been the dungeon boss. As she walked, she said he was annoyingly strong, and in her past life she would not have beaten him. She also said she had fought a monster that looked like the boy and used ancient martial arts. To her, he had been a very fun opponent. She could tell Li Shengmin had grown stronger. Now the young man would know how to answer properly. Hidden behind the wall, he had no idea what she meant. With a smile, he said he was too filthy to meet Wee Ji Hoyon like this. Curious, she asked who he had run into. She gave him some credit for surviving and making it that far. Meanwhile, she leaned against the wall. She said Sungmin had reached his dream and congratulated him. The two kept talking with the thick wall between them. Those 9 years meant a lot to the warrior. For Sungmin, they mattered because of all his effort and hard work. She went quiet for a moment, then asked if he didn't want to. As she had said before, she hated people putting expectations on her. Before she came to this world and after, she had always been watched by those awful eyes. But if it had been Sungmin all that time, she would not have minded. He apologized. She first thought he didn't want to go with her, but he said that wasn't it. Li Sungmin knew that if he went with her now, he would always live in her shadow and keep trying to become worthy of her. Even if he was stronger than Wee Ji Hoyon expected, it still wasn't enough for him. Smiling, she realized how greedy he was. 9 years had passed, and only 1 remained before their promise ended. So he had 1 year to reach Wee Ji Hoyon's level, and then they could meet. He said that after 10 years he would go with her. A wide smile spread across her face. Leaving him alone with that greed, she chose to wait a little longer. Before going, she warned him it would not be easy, and in 1 year she would be even stronger than him. From his answers, Wee Ji Hoyon saw just how much he had changed. The two stood up, and their faces showed their own goals. Truthfully, she wanted to take him right then, even by force. She wanted to turn back and see his face, but she held herself back. 1 year from now, they could talk more. They could eat and drink together and say everything openly. Then she realized there was one thing she had failed to say. Light fell across her face as she passed through the portal, without telling him she missed him. Outside the dungeon, someone screamed in despair. Bixogo asked why the man had taken her out of Somian and stayed behind instead. The drunk man said there had been no other choice, but to her that act was cowardly, not noble. Turning away, the woman said she would leave the Merim Alliance. She didn't want to remain in a place like that, and that man would never need to find her again. To her, what happened was disgusting. The drunk could only stand there in silence. Crying, she asked Li Simin to forgive her. Then she said she had to become stronger. The beings that walk this world on 2 feet have rules and morals to keep order, but some cast those rules aside and go beyond them. Beings that feed on others' blood, beings that reject death and keep living in a twisted way, beings that throw away honor and belief, beings called nature's barbarians, those who even reach the moon. beings that can hardly be called human. Those left on that boundary are called non-humans. The protagonist's face filled with shock. Lost, he found himself in a place he recognized right away. He had no idea where he was or what was going on. Then a voice asked why he looked so pale. Something behind him drew his attention. It was the voice of the monarch of the void. He asked where they were, and the monarch said it was his dream. When the boy borrowed his power, their spiritual worlds connected. So after falling asleep, he entered that dream. His body was now suffering the side effects of that power, but he would not. Relieved, the hero still grew uneasy, thinking he might be hallucinating since everything after the trial felt like a fever dream. The monarch of the void said he had taken that form to make him feel at ease. Then he tried showing the warrior his true form. His energy spread out around him. A moment later, a strange figure appeared before him. It was the great demon, the monarch of the void. In his original form, demons are beings that look like humans. Even if it wasn't his real body, he was glad to use that shape again after so long. The monarch had some questions for the young man. He wanted to know what the boy really was. The power he had lent him should have been impossible for someone like him to endure. Even so, the boy handled it well and used it like it had always been his. If not for the monarch, the warrior would already be dead because his body was too weak. When he lent him that power, he felt the boy's emotions, something even he had never experienced. Even then, something inside the boy formed a mental barrier strong enough to stop the monarch from taking his body. So the protagonist decided to explain himself. He told the monarch he was a regressor, and spoke of the training he got from the gods Mershi and Denir. Now the monarch understood why his mental barrier was so strong and why his talent didn't match his current level. He couldn't believe the boy had trained in the mind world for 2100 years, calling it pretty stupid. In the end, the hero was older than that strange figure in years, yet still only a child to the monarch. His body simply couldn't handle all the experience and training from the mind world. The monarch still called him weak even after 2100 years, and kept looking down on him. But those were the limits of a human. So the monarch of the void decided the young man should become a demon. Hearing that, the hero went stiff and speechless. He had already felt the price of borrowing that huge power, and his heart was closer to a monster's. If he became a demon, he would become a very interesting one. If that happened, he might even surpass the woman who obsessed him so much. The young man broke into a cold sweat, his eyes wide with fear. Still, he found the courage to refuse. Even then, he couldn't ignore the inhuman power living inside him. Thinking back, he remembered the order to head north. The old man told him to go where the 1,000-year snow never melts, and meet someone there in 5 years. The group was on its way to the great northern city, Travia, though the girl couldn't understand why they had to stay in such a freezing place for 3 months. While eating, the hero said there just weren't many places they could stop. The voice suggested turning into an object instead of wasting food, and the girl snapped at it to shut up. The warrior kept eating like nothing happened. 3 months had already passed since then. After escaping the dungeon, he paid heavily for borrowing the monarch of the void's power. Even before fully recovering, they headed north as Master Bullion instructed. Now, after 3 months on the road, they were close to Travia. Neville's information said this was once ruled by the bloodthirsty celestial demon. But after he lost an arm to a small celestial demon, demons and monsters started spreading everywhere. Even before that, Travia had already belonged to demons and other non-human factions. It was always known as the kingdom of non-humans. Demons like the monarch of the void, liches, vampires, werewolves, human-like monsters all lived there. After thinking about it, the protagonist understood why. He had been smelling dogs for a while now. From the dark forest, several pairs of eyes stared at them. That proved they were close to their destination. Then several werewolves burst from the trees and attacked. Ready to fight, the protagonist figured it was time for some exercise. The furious wolves charged straight at them. The girl warned him that lycanthropes grew stronger at night and normal weapons couldn't hurt them. But he didn't get what she meant. Then he remembered the elf who forged his spear. He had found a mysterious piece of orichalcum with incredible purity. It appeared after he defeated Widgetroyan's doppelganger in the dungeon. He wanted to turn that material into a spear. As payment, he offered the elf the leftover pieces. She was honored just to touch it and couldn't believe he was giving it up for a spear. When he saw how upset she was, he asked her to place the orichalcum into his armor instead. Back in the fight, he knew his weapon was far from ordinary. Because of that, he moved with sharp speed and struck the wolves one after another. His spear slammed into their snouts. His quick movements left them totally confused. He spun the spear smoothly and drove it right into their chests. Then he noticed he'd already taken down half of them. Curious, he asked why they attacked him. One wolf, angered by his nerve, warned he wouldn't walk away unharmed after what he'd done. They said he had entered the territory of the Ghost Wolf sect. The protagonist fired back that he didn't even know where their territory was. The wolves blamed him for ruining their income from the village. That made him remember beating up the people trying to sell the girl as a slave. The wolf didn't react after hearing that. As he struck another one down, the boy said they were the real bad guys here. He told them that if they stopped attacking, he would leave, but they clearly had no intention of letting him go. Before he could even finish speaking, the hero landed a clean blow. In the next instant, he cut the wolf's head off. The voice from his bracelet asked what he was thinking. He answered that he didn't need to think when killing scum like them. The voice said that with his strength, he could have killed all 10 easily. The boy just looked confused. To the voice, the way he fought made him look cocky, like he was showing off. It also pointed out that the girl beside him was very similar to the wolves. She explained that vampires and lycanthropes must serve a master and create weaker offspring away from that place. So since lycanthropes were lower ranked, they had a home much like theirs. If their lord was who the voice suspected, then they were in real trouble. In his current state, the hero might not beat that person, so he needed to stop acting so rashly. Somnium got annoyed, thinking the monarch was saying he should have let Ruby become a slave. The girl began crying and blaming herself, but the voice said this fight would have happened anyway once they entered the territory. Without saying much more, it gave one warning. There would always be someone stronger than Lee Sun-min. The monarch of the void's warning came true almost right away. As someone approached, a voice said it was a pleasure to meet them. The bracelet revealed the monarch's anger and despair. Then a white-haired figure in a strange coat stepped from the shadows. It was Ju-won, leader of the Ghost Wolf sect, known as the Mad Wolf. The warrior's body showed how nervous he had become. The leader glanced around and saw all his followers dead. Seeing his family defeated, he asked who the boy was. Feeling the tension, the hero gave his name. When Ju-won heard Lee Sun-min, he recognized him as Phantom Spear. He thought the boy belonged to the unorthodox sect, and even looked a lot like their kind. But none of that mattered now. Power started rising from Ju-won's body. He meant to kill the boy on the spot and avenge his family. Sensing that murderous intent, Sun-min froze. Then a voice ordered the Mad Wolf to stop at once. The monarch of the void mocked him, asking if he wasn't too old to bully the weak. The moment Ju-won felt that power, he knew who it was. It had been 400 years since their last meeting, and he thought the monarch was dead. The wolf asked what happened to his body, and why he was inside that child now. But the monarch couldn't answer. He didn't even know if his body was truly gone. Remembering an old lie, Ju-won thought back to that humiliating moment. The monarch noted that Ju-won had changed a lot, and used to be far wilder. He told Ju-won to leave at once and stop causing trouble. Watching all this, the boy quietly took it in. If a fight broke out, he wouldn't just stand there. Still, Ju-won said he was only passing by and hadn't really lost much. This time, he'd let it slide. He then asked if the warrior was headed to Travia. As he turned away, he told him to be careful. Others would not be as merciful as he was. Then the Mad Wolf vanished almost instantly beneath the starry sky. If they had fought, the protagonist likely would have lost. Ju-won was a monster who had built power for over 100 years and stood among the strongest non-humans. The monarch added that without him, the boy would already be dead. He was as weak as an insect. The warrior chose to ignore the voice. Ju-won was only the leader of a small sect. Even at the top, there were still bigger heights beyond him. Even so, Lee Sun-min felt happy realizing how vast the world really was. He wasn't as afraid now, and knowing there was still a path ahead excited him. Still, he kept thinking about Ju-won's warning that others would be less merciful. He had no idea who Ju-won meant. Elsewhere, the Mad Wolf stood alone in the dark void. He had met the monarch of the void again and couldn't believe the soul survived even after losing its body, so he went back through his memories. There was no doubt that had been the real monarch of the void, still alive after 400 years. That human was the famous Phantom Spear, and the monarch was inside him. He was probably the one who broke some of Jenny's toys. The woman said she hadn't cared much before, but now the boy was becoming a real nuisance. Looking closer, she noticed what he looked like now. Even though he was human, the boy looked like one of them, and because of the monarch of the void, the wolf let him go. Either way, the woman planned to keep watching his journey to Travia. Still, they couldn't act too fast because of the power inside that human body. For now, that was all the information they had. If anything happened, the predators would notify Ju-won. At last, he had found a heart thief. Neville showed that the document held key details about Travia, including patterns and traits of its forces, then handed the papers to Lee Sun-min. Predators, no one, and the 5 leaders, the Black Stars, they held incredible power, and he knew the danger was huge. The others Ju-won mentioned were probably those predators, and the Mad Wolf was one of the 5 leaders, the Black Stars. Realizing there were 4 more like him, the hero grew worried. They had all lived for hundreds of years, so facing them would be incredibly hard. If he wanted to survive next time, he should let the Monarch of the Void take over. Even so, the boy refused to become a monster, or give the figure in his bracelet that perfect chance. He knew his master had walked that road, and for his honor he would keep going without losing who he was. The monarch couldn't see why he rejected that power, but the warrior said he didn't want strength that didn't feel earned by his own effort. In the end, the protagonist was lucky Ju-won spared him that time. A voice said a crazy woman in that place liked men like him. Seeing the wreckage around him, the red-haired girl was stunned. She said everyone stayed close while he was strong, but the moment he weakened, they all turned on him. Even then, he still killed them all with that broken body. In front of her, he only seemed to shine brighter as he let out more of his power. She touched his face and called him a pitiful man. Then, without hesitation, she punched him in the face. Desperate, he refused help from a vampire and told her to stay back. He had no plan to be fooled by a woman like her. This was Bakhmuzin, the celestial demon and former king of Travia. To the vampire, the whole thing was fascinating. She didn't even know why, but a man like him made her heart race like never before. As she licked her wounds, Janella the vampire queen and a black star of the predators decided she wanted Bakhmusin for herself. If he took her offer, she would restore his missing arm and give him the power to beat the one who reduced him to this state. At that moment, pain tore through all of Bakhmusin's limbs. Gritting his teeth at her, he said he refused. Janella had expected him to say yes, so his answer made her furious. Even after losing to someone younger, his will still shined, and that was exactly why she liked him. But every time he rejected her, that strength would slowly fade, so she knew it wouldn't be long before he finally gave in. Still, that wouldn't satisfy Janella. It was always the same. Once she got her toy, she lost interest and went looking for another. She had played that game for a very long time. While she walked in silence, a man called out, "Master!" She turned at once to hear him out. He warned her that a strange young man had entered the city. The man looked human, but his energy was not. Right away, Janella knew it was the boy Juwon had mentioned. She thought Mad Wolf was a total fool for letting him leave unharmed. Acting like it had nothing to do with her, she still decided to see the boy for herself. Near a wall, someone sat with a huge chest wound, almost looking dead. People kept walking through the streets without stopping. Even so, some men could feel the heavy tension in the air. They had finally reached Travia, but after the attack on the celestial demon, the city was in chaos. A closer look revealed piles of bodies. The monarch of the void warned that they weren't ordinary corpses. They were all non-humans. Lycanthropes, vampires, and more had gathered in Travia. They normally stayed hidden, so walking around in the open proved the city was far from normal. Rubia asked if they really had to come to a place like this, since the old man might have been wrong. Lee Sun-min paused when he heard an unfamiliar voice speak to him. Startled, he noticed Janella beside him, saying she was someone very important. With bright yellow eyes, she introduced herself as Janella and said it was a strange